Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Ask it if it has seen any humans with long ears. After Wolf relayed the message, the little wolf expressed its meaning with a howl that Ethan couldn't distinguish at all. Young master, it says it saw 2 long-eared humans locked in a cage. Ethan pulled his wife into his arms, rubbing her furry ears as he asked, "Do you think we should tell those elves?" Wolf's first reaction wasn't to analyze the pros and cons, but to ask directly, "What do you mean by a group?" Her deep red eyes flashed with a dangerous light. She might have too many competitors. Fortunately, Ethan flicked her head, instantly clearing her eyes. "What are you thinking about?" She pouted unhappily. "It's all because my young master doesn't let me rest easy. All he thinks about are indecent things all day long." Ethan decided to end the conversation. "Anyway, let's think about how to handle this. After all, those elves have some connection with us." The wolf girl, whose IQ wasn't particularly high, thought about it very seriously, and from the bottom of her heart she also felt a little sorry for these guys. After all, he ended up in such a dangerous situation while saving his companions. She said with slight hesitation, "I think we should still tell them. Even if the difference in strength between the two sides is huge, the decision should be in their hands. In that case, I'll write a letter and have your men deliver it to them." Steppenwolves roam a wide area, making it easy to find the elves' tracks. Wolf took the letter and left, glancing at it furtively before placing it on the little wolf to make sure there were no flirtatious words exchanged. Then a collar was put on the wolf cub, signifying that it had been accepted by Wolf. This black collar can be perfectly concealed by thick hair, making it completely undetectable to outsiders. The letter was fastened tightly around the neck by a collar. Wolf stroked its head and warned, "You must find those long-eared elves. Whatever you do, don't bite anyone. If you don't deliver this letter, you're not coming back, understand?" The little wolf whimpered and then ran out of Log Town. The Wolf King's words had a natural power of control over it, and it instinctively obeyed Wolf's commands. The Wild Bull tribe is the largest orc tribe in the vicinity of the North Wind region, with over 1,000 warriors and more than a dozen great warriors, including 5 heroic warriors, not even counting their leader. This power was enough to easily suppress Viscount Northwind, not to mention that the smaller tribes under the Wild Bull tribe were also obedient to them. For this reason, Viscount Northwind had no choice but to back down when facing the Minotaur tribe. Although a deal had been struck with the Viscount Bull, as the tribe's chief was in no hurry to execute it immediately. He only said he was going to send troops, but he didn't say he was going right now. "Even if things don't go well, we can still drag it out until this winter. As for whether they will rush the work, that depends on the Viscount's sincerity." He planned to delay for 6 months to gather information about the knight and the Viscount's attitude. That way they can easily raise prices on the spot. It must be said that the gift Viscount Northwind gave him was quite satisfactory, and he has recently become completely obsessed with it. He patted the armrest of the chair, and an elven slave wearing leather chains crawled over on his knees, licking his calves with a fawning smile. The bull comfortably loosened his clothes, his pent-up weapon eagerly anticipating the warmth. He looked at the slaves already showing belly and planned to let the other brothers in the tribe play with her after she gave birth to the child. The painful cries echoed through the chaotic camp, making the faces of the rangers lurking there even more somber. After the slaves were all dealt with, the bull walked to a cage in the corner where he had specially kept a healthy slave. Looking at the elf, who was in great pain and had tears streaming down his face, he smiled wickedly. "Don't worry, after I've completely ruined your companions, I'll come and pamper you. We haven't found any clues these past few days. These guys are so lazy they won't even budge an inch." Someone couldn't help but speak up. They had been watching the tribe's camp for 3 days. The higher-ups of this group of minotaurs don't even lift a finger. The first-tier ones are a bit better, occasionally going hunting. The second-tier individuals all lived together, forming a naturally tight defense. They didn't even dare to test the waters, fearing they'd be trapped there and never get out. Out of a sense of responsibility, they continued to wander around the tribe, waiting for an opportunity to arise. At this moment, Alice wished she could summon the mages of her tribe and use a spell to turn these thousands of scum into nutrients for the trees. But now, she flipped through the crumpled letter out of boredom. They got this information from a wolf, but thankfully they held back and didn't kill the wolf outright. The letter was most likely written by Ethan. They were the only noble family in the vicinity who knew of their existence. Suddenly, the letter could no longer withstand the crumpling and tore in two. There seems to be another piece of paper inside. Alice pulled it out. There wasn't much written on it, just a few sentences. If you encounter any difficulties that you cannot handle, feel free to seek my help, but everything comes at a price. Cost. Alice muttered in shame and indignation. That persistent pervert, he deserves to be unable to find a wife. All this talk is just because he's lusting after her body. She angrily crumpled the note into a ball, intending to throw it directly into the fire. After a final hesitation, I ultimately decided not to give it up. The beastmen have never engaged in production, they only know how to take from nature. Where do they get so much food to keep them lying around for so long? Let's go find Baron Ethan first. Seeing their leader, who had been silent for a long time, finally speak, his companions began to ask questions. Why go looking for that Baron? Are we just going to abandon this fellow countryman? In response to these questions, Alice explained, as the orcs' old adversaries, the border nobles often have more detailed information about them. That's the first point. Secondly, we might be able to ask him for help. From a human's perspective, every orc corpse is a valuable military achievement. They value them highly. After a brief silence, everyone agreed to the proposal. There was no other way. If they were to launch a surprise attack and face 5 second-tier and a dozen first-tier beastmen, none of them would be confident of escaping unscathed. Next, they were to search for Baron Ethan's supposed territory in a log forest. More than a month has passed since Viscount Northwind's last attack, and the days have flowed by uneventfully. Thanks to the diligent labor of the serfs, Log Town finally began to resemble a small town. Ethan treated them quite well, at least they were far from starving to death, and the relatively transparent promotion system made them feel secure. As long as they work honestly, the Lord won't suddenly kill a few serfs for amusement. Rather, it would be more accurate to say that Ethan strictly disciplined his knights, soldiers, and other free men. No one is allowed to lay a hand on serfs. This is Lao Tizu's property. The river that flowed through Log Town, now renamed Log River, has become a river of wood. The area was littered with driftwood which floated downstream, carrying sturdy logs to Howling Territory and other places. In return, Ethan's food reserves were also partially replenished. Although it's just a drop in the bucket since people's demand for wood is still very limited until winter, Ethan was eager to develop his business. Only trade could turn money into more money. But even the most skilled cook can't cook without rice. This land lacks the conditions for trade. At least Log Town needs to be developed into a small city in order to consistently attract caravans. Occasionally, small caravans would pass through this area, replenishing their supplies and doing small business with the wealthy soldiers and artisans. Everything new here is worth pursuing since the Lord doesn't collect taxes from them anyway. At that moment, a small caravan from Northwind City, whose destination was Howling Territory, arrived in Log Town. The young town had a few children who were the families of the knights and squires who had initially accompanied Ethan. Ethan was very kind to them, occasionally buying them candy and snacks. He hated brats, but these little guys, who had been loyal to the Joel family for generations and were now loyal to him and his descendants, were someone Ethan was happy to cultivate their loyalty. Vendors also love making money from this. Candies and snacks that are inexpensive but have high profit margins are very popular. Secondly, there's practical furniture. The artisans in the territory often only serve the Lord and their prices are much lower. To outsiders, the merchant's cart was like a treasure chest, containing everything they needed. Even though the knights of this territory had told the merchants that there would be no tax, the sensible ones still sent some things over. Business is all about taking it slow and steady. Wolf also has a sweet tooth. As word spread among merchants, the news that a tax-free town had appeared in the log forest quickly reached the entire Northwind region. The leisurely life of a landlord who knows how long it will last. Ethan guessed that the orcs would make a move soon and hoped that the elves would accept his offer and join him in fighting the orcs. He wasn't simply lusting after Alice's body. He didn't demand the complete annihilation of the orcs, but at the very least he wanted to inflict a heavy blow on the Minotaur tribe so that they would abandon their plans to fight him. Otherwise, caught between two sides, his only option would be to flee with his people, becoming homeless vagrants wandering the borderlands. At that time, he truly became someone that everyone hated, someone that anyone could spit on and leave. His soldiers were already well trained, all that was needed was a battle to test their skills. In the war against the orcs, what he lacked was high-end combat power, that is, extraordinary beings. If the Rangers are willing to join them, they won't be at a disadvantage in this area. His observations were very accurate. Of the 7 Rangers, 4 were at the second rank and 3 at the first rank. In that case, they will have enough strength to gain an advantage on the battlefield. Rangers are quite useful in low-quality warfare. Their short bows can shoot at least 500 meters away. Short swords and nature magic are also very useful. It's just that the parents of the elves are carefree, letting this group of third-tier seedlings roam all over the continent. However, for elves, this is also one of the few ways they learn about the outside world. Long-lived species with lifespans exceeding 500 years are easily detached from reality. In this respect, even a 5th-tier archmage is somewhat inferior to them. The Grand Master only lived to be a little over 200 years old, and he still had to endure the hardship of attending academic conferences regularly. Ethan, who was staring blankly at the vendors, spotted several dark figures in the distance. The wandering knights have arrived. Their timing was perfect. The vendors were still there, allowing them to replenish their supplies. If these guys who drink dew and eat nature can afford to spend money. Alice turned her head, blushing as she accepted the silver coins from Ethan's hand. I will pay you back. It's okay if you can't pay it back. You can use other things to settle the debt. She let out a soft hum and took the money to buy what everyone needed. The most important thing is to buy candy. This sweet little gadget can quickly replenish the body's energy and restore strength. These are strategic resources on the battlefield. After arranging food and lodging for the weary travelers, Ethan told them to discuss everything else tomorrow. Who cares? Let's build up our goodwill first. Apart from Alice, the other Rangers could only be said to be unafraid of him, but trust was far from being a given. The Rangers were unaware that the orcs intended to attack Ethan, so they were naturally at a disadvantage in the negotiations. With their common enemy transformed into a one-sided demand, Ethan was naturally able to ask for a higher price. Letting them rest for the night was also based on this consideration. Being naturally suspicious, they certainly wouldn't feel comfortable spending the night in Log Town, fearing the consequences after a night of worry. Not only did she feel a pang of guilt towards Ethan, but her mind also wasn't very sharp. The kind elves were unaware that Ethan had completely outmaneuvered them. The next day, they successfully held a meeting. Apart from Ethan, who brought a military commander named Rasu, no one else from the territory was able to attend this secret meeting. Except for Wolf, who was eavesdropping at the door. With Ethan's years of training under the Sword Saint, he could naturally tell that she was openly eavesdropping by the door. But there's nothing he can do. She's his wife, so he can only spoil her a little. Ethan glanced at the Rangers and had to admit they were really young, probably only a few years older than him. With their talent, advancing to the 3rd tier is almost a certainty. Alice spoke first. We want to rescue our companions in the Bull tribe, but we can't do it alone, so. She was interrupted by Ethan before she could finish speaking. Don't even mention you guys. Even if Viscount Northwind came, he wouldn't be a match for the wild bull. I think you should just go to bed. Despite her dissatisfaction, Alice patiently said, while the Bull tribe is indeed well equipped, we have seen the knights and soldiers in your territory. They are more than capable of handling their small force. As long as we can lure them out in batches, they won't be a match for us. Ethan nodded. That's a good idea, but the problem is, why should I help you? If the Bull tribe suffers a major blow, then his smaller tribes will no longer be under his command. At that point, the entire region will descend into chaos. And those who benefit the most from this situation are the border nobles. This winter will be much easier for them. Ethan's response was swift and resolute. I can easily defend against winter attacks even without you. On their way, the wandering knights saw an army undergoing drills, whose numbers and quality far surpassed those of the minor nobles. You nobles always love beating around the bush. Just tell me straight, what do you want us to do? Clearly, the straightforward elves didn't have that much patience, so they immediately handed the initiative over to Ethan. Ethan took a sip of tea and said slowly, I believe you elves also abide by the principle of equivalent exchange. Since you want me to send troops to help you, you should help me in return. Is that all right? The knights-errant did not object. After all, they were the ones who needed his help and his conditions didn't sound so bad. Alice replied, how do you want us to help you? Ethan shifted into a more comfortable sitting position. Since you're going to continue searching for your companions here anyway, why don't you temporarily join my territory? And I'll follow your orders, by the way. If you don't object, I think this is also part of mutual help. Faced with these seemingly reasonable conditions, they agreed to the cooperation. With food and lodging provided plus the assistance of Ethan's army, it was a good thing for them. The negotiations ended and Alice pushed open the door. Standing before her was a dignified and elegant wolf. Alice wondered to herself, how come there are beastmen here? Wolf smiled gently and extended her hand to her. Alice, puzzled, grasped it. Hello, I'm Ethan's wife. Has something unpleasant happened between you two? She emphasized the word wife. No, it's more like we're the ones causing Ethan trouble. In Logtown, you are truly honored guests. After Wolf finished speaking, she released her grip. Alice watched her leave, her impression of Ethan already at its worst. What a pervert, he even dared to lay a hand on a teenage beastman. However, judging from their affectionate manner, perhaps they really are a harmonious couple. Wrong. Alice shook her head. If this guy were truly a good husband who cared for his wife, why would he even be eyeing me? Her gaze turned cold. She truly was a beast in human form. Just then, a sound outside caught her attention. This is the cry for help from the great deer. She looked outside and saw a dozen or so desert wolves surrounding their mounts, howling incessantly. Ethan, how come there are wolves in your territory? Ethan sat there watching Wolf and Alice interact. He was completely numb. Wolf was determined not to let the elf steal her husband, giving her no chance whatsoever. Seeing Ethan's gaze, she gave a sly smile. She then whistled and the wolves outside dispersed on their own. I'm so sorry, my little pets mistook your friend for food. Please be careful. Alice glanced at her warily, then went down to check on her companions. The hall finally quieted down, now only the two of them remained. Ethan looked at her intently. You've been a little naughty today. I told you I wouldn't let anyone take you away from me. There's really nothing between us, we're just friends at most. Does the young master really just want to be friends with her? Ethan stroked her head. He felt Wolf was being a bit too permissive. Don't you understand our relationship? Wolf let out a whimper and knelt down, leaving only her tail wagging in front of Ethan. Why Tilda, please punish me, master. They've even resorted to this tactic. Ethan couldn't very well tell her to put her hair up in a bun. In the end, I managed to coax her for a while. Afterwards, Wolf watched his departing figure, pondering something in her mind. It seems the plan to monopolize the young master has failed. The young master is indeed very fond of that elf. She quickly regrouped. Failure wasn't scary. What was scary was that the young master valued that elf more than himself. Since that's the case, there's nothing I can do to stop the young master, so I should try to show more of myself. As long as I'm still the most important person in the young master's heart, then it doesn't matter. She could be a little reluctant to part with some. She's not a stingy person. The wandering knights rested here for a few days. After enduring wind and rain and sleeping in the open, they finally had a place to stay and naturally made sure to get into top condition. They even grew to like their time here, except for the great elk that were chased by steppe wolves for half the day every day. Ethan kept refusing their request to set off, giving reasons that they found utterly baffling. What do you mean by saying the orcs will still attack even though it's spring? They didn't understand, but Ethan assured them that the bull tribe would send people over in a few days. Even their leader would personally participate. That will be the time for the wandering knights to make their appearance. The bull tribe didn't keep them waiting long. After the Viscount urged them a second time, they finally arrived, albeit belatedly. Wolf's wolf pack knew of their location from hundreds of miles away. Before the fight even started, their situation was completely clear to everyone. Who would suspect a wolf by the roadside? The orcs have always been arrogant and complacent. Even though their previous forces and Viscount Northwind's men suffered a major defeat at Ethan's hands, they still believed they could easily conquer this land. They also possessed a formidable force, with at least 500 elite soldiers from the Minotaur tribe, plus thousands of warriors from other tribes. There were 20 great warriors among them and 4 heroic spirit warriors. It's impossible for such a force not to expand. Ethan had 500 soldiers at his disposal, half of whom could only be considered militia. The equipment is so-so, but the weapons are decent. Listening to Ethan's explanation, even the usually carefree ranger became serious. A direct confrontation with this level of power is impossible. The bull himself has come, which means he's confidently left his home to the remaining members of his tribe. Thanks to the Steppenwolf's reconnaissance abilities, they had plenty of time to deal with the attack. Moreover, large armies often move slowly, especially disorganized orc forces. Looking at the map, Ethan immediately said, "In that case, let's raid their house first. I'll add 2 second-tier knights for you. Let's try to bring them back in one go. What if they launch a direct attack? They'll definitely be furious when they hear their house was burgled, so I have to hold them off for no. Throughout history, raiding enemy bases has been a timeless and effective tactic. While the only lesson humanity can learn from history is that it learns nothing, it's clear that everyone is taking precautions against it. The problem is that orcs are generally not considered human. The border nobles have never launched a counterattack against the orcish territory. How much is a military merit worth, and how much does it cost to train an armed soldier? The orcish territory has neither food nor special products. Playing this is a complete money loser, not to mention that they are unlikely to win. Fighting the orcs in the wild would be suicide. Therefore, the bull never imagined that someone would come to steal its home. The men he left behind in the tribe were only there to guard against other smaller tribes, nothing more. The bull looked at the town in front of him. This small town, which did not occupy an area, had a wall 4 meters high. Thanks to the massive reserves of logs, these walls were not only built quickly but also of the highest quality. Quality in the literal sense. The specially treated logs are not only incredibly hard but also have an extremely smooth surface, making them excellent for protecting against orcs. This town is difficult to conquer. This was the first conclusion that the bull drew. Their scouts are very cunning. This is the second conclusion. Before they knew it, the wall was covered with archers as if they could unleash a barrage of arrows at any moment. Although he didn't know when his offensive intentions would be exposed, the bull had his own way of dealing with it. He ordered the troops to remain in place and then went over there with a few attendants. The distance was perfectly controlled. Human archers simply couldn't reach it. Fortunately, Ethan hadn't planned to shoot any arrows in the first place. Are you kidding me? If archery were so easy to train, then knights wouldn't need to study it. He was just putting on an act, trying to intimidate the other party. It now appears to have been very effective. The bull raised his voice and shouted in a not-so-standard Mandarin. "You daring little devils, you've been blind for so long, coming here to run a noodle stall." This was exactly what Ethan wanted. His plan was to stall for time, and having the opportunity to negotiate with this somewhat intelligent but not very bright guy was perfect. With a little tugging and a couple of days' wait, the bull's home base will naturally explode. However, judging from the bull's imposing presence, he's a bit of a handful. Orcs disdain the weak, they only respect the strong. The wild bull is about to advance to the 3rd tier, at which time the wild bull tribe's status among the beastmen will be further enhanced, and they will no longer need to stay on the border. Yes, like the border nobles, most of the people who bordered human territory were driven over there because they were too weak. Half step to the 3rd tier, this is going to be difficult, Ethan muttered to himself. He jumped down from the city wall step by step, and as the distance between them closed, his eyes grew colder and his aura more powerful. Unfortunately, I am only at the 3rd stage of the great perfection of the 9th heaven. He muttered a remark, saying that his mere presence overwhelmed the 4 second-tier opponents. If his teacher hadn't told him not to advance to the third rank before comprehending that so-called sword intent, he would have broken through long ago. To this day, he still doesn't understand what this thing is, and consequently his control over the sword isn't very good either. But he was a genius renowned throughout the Central Empire. It's a pity my sword saint teacher is dead, otherwise he wouldn't have been exiled to the border to watch you guys bare your teeth. His voice was very soft, but the people opposite him heard it clearly. Immediately, a heroic warrior rushed forward. A second later, his attack froze in midair, a gleaming silver sword pressed against his throat. I said, "Do you even deserve to rush up here and die?" He watched as the sword tip moved closer to his face, then Ethan slapped him aside with a little force. The bull's face turned pale, even he couldn't withstand sword skills of this level. His fate won't be much better than the guy's just now. But seeing that the other party doesn't seem to have any murderous intent, it seems we can still have a proper talk. Ethan's face turned deathly pale. He probably had less than half his strength left. If he were to receive another sword strike, he would immediately collapse from exhaustion. I'm feeling weaker and weaker lately. Am I really going to be completely drained by Wolf? Although this didn't have much of an impact, he was only at the level of swinging his sword twice at the beginning. Ethan stopped in front of the bull. "What are you doing here with your orc army, trying to cause trouble?" The bull shuddered and stood up straight like a student whose name had been called by the homeroom teacher, even speaking the common language correctly. It's a misunderstanding. How could I possibly start a fight without warning a knight as skilled as you, a newcomer? Ethan's sharp eyes were fixed on him, making him feel uneasy. "We're just passing through this time." "Yes, just passing through." "Purpose?" The purpose is to go and replenish food supplies, maybe go hunting or something." Ethan put his hand on his shoulder and joked, "Since we're going hunting, let me recommend a good place. Northwind City, it's a resource-rich place, and the Collin family is very wealthy." A cold sweat broke out on the bull's forehead. Knowing the answer already, he asked, "Do you have a grudge against Viscount Northwind?" Ethan asked directly, "How much did Viscount Northwind pay you?" "This." Ethan waved his hand, interrupting him. "If you leave with your men now, I will let bygones be bygones." Then Ethan turned around directly, seemingly unafraid of his sneak attack, and slowly walked towards the door. The bull saw the open gate and its desire to attack rose within it, but then subsided. This guy could actually kill me with a single sword strike. Having been humiliated for no reason, the bull returned to camp with his followers. He needed to think carefully about how to handle this situation. Despite being called a minotaur, he wasn't a complete idiot who couldn't think straight. Is this newcomer to the border bluffing, or is Viscount Northwind deliberately trying to trap me? We have enough rations for the march to last a few more days. Let's test the waters slowly. Meanwhile, Ellie and her rangers were almost at their destination. Throughout the journey, she kept replaying the scene of saying goodbye in her mind. She privately approached Ethan and asked him about the feasibility of the plan. "What if you don't stall for enough time and the bulls attack directly?" Ethan replied with a smile, "Then let's bump into each other." "What if I can't hold on any longer?" His smile faded slightly. "I can handle it." Alice noticed a hint of insecurity in his eyes. "What if you can't hold out then?" Ethan brazenly patted the top of her head. "All right, Jinshuang, I'll hold on until you get back. Don't worry about me. Anyway, your mission is to rescue your comrades, right? I'll prioritize helping you." Alice slapped his groping hand away, but her heart skipped a beat. Why are you being so good to her? Looking at the minotaurs living leisurely in the wild valley, Alice felt a growing sense of urgency. Perhaps it was to save their companions, or perhaps it was to get back to Ethan as soon as possible. That B********D is willing to risk his own safety to trust her. She will never let him down. The ranger behind him nudged his companion with his elbow. "Do you think something's wrong with Alice's condition?" "Yes, it's quite something to see you so murderous, eldest sister. Those minotaurs really deserve to die." He turned to Kane and said, "Sir Kane, I'll need your help from now on." Kane nodded in agreement. That was the only thing he needed to do with this exceptionally high-caliber team. The ranger is indeed a superior scout, but no matter how excellent their eyesight, it can't compare to what a wolf sees with its own eyes. He hasn't been idle these days. Although he still can't understand what the other wolves are saying, he can now vaguely distinguish his lone wolf. The lone wolf under his command completely trusted him and obeyed his orders without question. The group stopped at the top of the valley. As Lone Wolf went down alone to scout the situation, Alice began assigning tasks to each person. The four of us, along with Afen and Joe, two second-tier knights, will be the main force of the raid. The goal of this battle is not to inflict casualties, but simply to rescue the people as quickly as possible. Afterwards, the remaining members of the first tier will act as backup. It gets dark very quickly at the border. Before long, the twilight sun, emitting a pale orange glow, descended below the horizon, leaving only a faint yellow ring to indicate its presence. At night, the Minotaur's vigilance is at its lowest, but this also foreshadows chaos. This makes the operation even more dangerous. The lone wolf had thoroughly tested the Minotaur's plans. As expected, their defenses were lax and the two remaining heroic warriors were engaged in a life-or-death struggle. However, only one elf was seen, and fortunately, she had not yet met her demise. What Cain didn't tell them was that the lone wolf was fed a few leftover bones by the Minotaurs. The proud wolf naturally wouldn't accept food offered in contempt, but the shape of the bone was intriguing. The operation went smoothly. The sentries, who were merely pretending to be sentries on the perimeter, were easily dealt with by the rangers' silent shortbow and sharp blade. Meanwhile, in their camp, the patrol guards, with their leader absent, chose to slack off, lying in their tents to sleep. To make things easier, the two knights removed their heavy armor and joined the rangers in the silent darkness. Lightness, a basic spell for rangers, makes the body lighter so that even two burly knights can move as quietly as cats. The elf, filled with worry and fear, was in a daze in her cage when she seemed to see her companions. It wasn't until the elf in front of her started picking the lock on the cage that she realized her companions had come to rescue her. "Calm down, we'll get you out of here soon." Alice whispered words of comfort as she picked the lock. The elf's lips trembled, the trembling eventually widening, and she said in a tearful voice, "Tess, they ate her." Alice stopped prying the chains, her face expressionless, and silently uttered a single word through biting her lip. They didn't have much time left. Their mission, besides rescuing their companions, also included creating chaos. Otherwise, they won't be able to attract the bulls back to reinforce them. Still basking in the euphoric rush of hormones, the guard's neck was silently severed. The elf's dagger never misses. The assassination attempt continued for a long time until a roar awakened the entire slumbering camp. Alice wiped the blood-stained and greasy dagger from her hand. These men were not enough to quell the hatred in her heart. But there will be other opportunities later. Perhaps assimilated by this rugged land, she became increasingly paranoid. Since stepping out of the elf forest, she has gone from being reluctant to attack people to decisively dealing with bandits, and now all she wants is to kill to her heart's content. These beasts, worse than animals, are unworthy of being called an intelligent race. Ultimately, cannibalism is unacceptable to any intelligent being, and if you dare to do it, you should be prepared for retaliation. On this land, the roles of hunter and prey have never been fixed. The 6 Tier 2 warriors were like war gods in front of a group of unarmored units. After their leader was assassinated, they also managed to organize themselves into an effective formation to stop the massacre. Fortunately, the Tauren's warlike nature saved them. They quickly brought the chaos to an end and gradually regrouped under the guidance of others. Seeing this, the wandering knights did not covet the place and left the Bull tribe's camp in an instant. Before leaving, they left them dozens of rockets as a great gift. After the operation was over, Alice didn't linger and headed straight for Log Town. She didn't want to lose her companions again. "That jerk, you have to hold on. I'm waiting to go back and save you." Ethan's image flashed through her mind. She certainly didn't want to see his corpse on the Minotaur's dinner table. Meanwhile, the bull, who had made contact with Viscount Northwind, finally understood the situation. The Viscount frankly stated his situation. Once Ethan is dead, he can move his family away from the border. In return, the entire North Wind region will become the backyard of the Bull tribe, and with ample resources, they will quickly grow up. Their status among the orcs will be further elevated. He originally thought that Ethan was a third-order being or even higher, But given the Viscount's promise, which he vehemently agreed to, he reluctantly believed it was a special second-tier rank. So special that it can instantly kill opponents of the same level. No matter how strong it is, a second-order weapon is still a second-order weapon. If you keep piling up human lives, you can eventually kill him. The bull was also curious about the secret to Ethan's strength and hoped to find out more. Even if I can't train it myself, I can raise a few human slaves to train it. The strength of the bull tribe will only increase. He is given the order to begin the attack first thing tomorrow morning and to make sure that the tall walls of Log Town collapse and are breached. As the saying goes, a population of over 1,000 is boundless. When they saw the massive horde of orcs rushing towards them from afar, even the veterans gripped their weapons tightly. Log Town lacked ranged weapons, so the hastily trained archers could only manage a few haphazard attempts which naturally yielded minimal results. As a large tribe, they had extensive experience in siege warfare and had even built several siege engines. Before long, under the cover of numerous beastmen, several siege ladders were erected on the city wall. Meanwhile, the city gates were constantly being battered by battering rams. It was a tough day. The number of cannon fodder that the wild bull tribe had transferred from smaller tribes was rapidly decreasing. The boulders and logs stored in Log Town also became materials for them to build the gentle slope. 1,000 people doesn't sound like a lot. In historical records, battles of this magnitude are roughly equivalent to village skirmishes. Some larger countries don't even bother to record these small scenes. But even in this small, unremembered battlefield, the pile of corpses had reached more than half the height of the 4-meter-high city wall. With the superior physical abilities of the orcs, even a minotaur could climb over this meter-high wall. Various orcs charged forward, trampling over a pile of mangled flesh and blood, mixed with logs and boulders dropped by the defenders. Some recruits with poor mental fortitude couldn't help but vomit, and some even collapsed to the ground, losing their ability to fight. Ethan couldn't really blame them. Some people are just naturally less resilient. But they simply couldn't expect to stay in the army. In theory, the combat effectiveness of a qualified orc soldier is almost the same as that of an armed soldier, but the difference in their understanding of combat leads to the gap in their performance on the battlefield. In the culture of the orcs, dying on the battlefield is an honorable thing, meaning that they will be rewarded by the tribal spirits after death and may even become spirits themselves. In contrast, the orc tribes, known for their chaos and bloodshed, show considerable respect and offer assistance to the families of their fallen warriors. After all, no one can say for sure which fallen warrior will become a spirit watching over them from heaven. In contrast, consider the aristocrats who pride themselves on civilization. Their modus operandi is generally, it's an honor to serve the master, and as for the promised compensation, you're lucky if they don't wipe out your family's fortune. Although Ethan did his best in this regard, personally receiving the families of every fallen soldier and giving them all the treatment they deserved. But loyalty to the Lord ultimately couldn't compare to the fear of facing death. Log Town is, after all, a newly established territory, and it's unrealistic to expect people to be completely devoted to you in less than a year. It's simply impossible to expect everyone to be like that. He still had quite a few loyal subordinates. The attack lasted into the night. Bull's command was simple, but it was highly effective despite heavy losses. Since the entire town is surrounded by city walls, he can only concentrate his forces to attack one side of the wall. He can even pile up corpses to get to the top. Moreover, in just one day, the gates of Log Town were breached 3 times, and each time it took Rasu's command of his soldiers, who made huge sacrifices to push them back. However, the tribal chiefs beside him looked grim. Their men were nearly wiped out, and the bull still refused to send his men into battle. The bull glanced at their small group of people and said, "Tell them to go up." The battle was nearing its end. Sending these few men up would only serve to deliver their own casualties, further increasing the mountain of corpses below the city walls. The bull knew this perfectly well, but that was exactly what he wanted. He snapped the necks of those who were dissatisfied. In his eyes, these people were nothing more than cannon fodder. As for whether they carried out their orders, their entire family was ruled by the bull tribe. The soldiers, their eyes glazed over, were rotated out, grateful to have survived the day. Fortunately, they were defending their homeland, so their meals were plentiful, filling, and of excellent taste and quality. A bowl of warm meat soup was enough to dispel their emptiness and fatigue, allowing them to fall asleep peacefully and await the second handover. Ethan, who was overwhelmed by the defense, finally saw Alice return, and he forced a smile. "How is the operation going?" Alice's usually gentle eyes were now filled with hatred. "Those damned bastards, I'll fight them to the death." Ethan didn't ask how her fellow elven slaves were doing. Elven slaves who fell into the hands of others rarely fared well, let alone orcs. Judging from their appearance, they must have caused considerable damage to the Bull tribe. I wonder when those guys will send word over. "How's the situation in Log Town?" Alice asked worriedly. After all, Ethan chose to send people to rescue Elpha first in order to help her, and it would be a shame if Log Town suffered heavy losses as a result. Ethan shook his head with a wry smile. "The situation is not optimistic. They've only sent some small fry so far. The elites haven't even made a move yet, let alone the extraordinary ones. My troops suffered 182 dead, and countless others were seriously wounded or lightly wounded. If they go all out tomorrow..." He paused for a moment, then said, "Then you should prepare to run away. We can't hold out." Alice hadn't expected this outcome. She asked, "If I leave, what about you?" The question was met with silence. Defending the territory was the duty of the nobles, and it was also their fundamental duty. "If you're not leaving, then I'm not leaving either," Alice said defiantly. Ethan looked up. "No, my duty is to protect the people of my territory. Since you've temporarily joined my territory, I will protect you. Then I choose to join the battle. The elves will not abandon any of their companions." After saying that, Alice turned around and made to leave. "Etc." She didn't turn around but simply asked, "Is there anything else?" A large hand stroked the top of her head. "Let me touch it one more time, it feels so good." Snort. Alice expressed her dissatisfaction but obediently stood still and waited for him to put his hand down. Ethan watched her departing figure and sighed. The best way to deal with a tsundere is definitely through a self-inflicted injury. A plaintive voice came from behind. "Young master, I want to touch it too." "Young master, things haven't really gotten to that point yet, have they?" Wolf rubbed against his back, using massage to soothe Ethan's still recovering body. "Well, theoretically speaking, that's true. After all, our army's weakness lies in its lack of mid-level combat power. As things stand, we don't even have a unit that can match heavy infantry. But things changed after the elves joined. Including you and me, we now have 8 Tier 2 and 4 Tier 1 members, giving us a slight advantage in high-level combat. My only worry is the Bull Demon King. That guy won't be easy to stop without at least 3 opponents of the same level." In Ethan's perception, this guy was just one step away from the 3rd tier, otherwise he wouldn't have called him a half-step 3rd tier. Ethan patted Wolf's head. "You might need to play in tomorrow's siege. We need high-end combat power to directly join the battle to reduce losses on the main battlefield, and to force the Bull and his men to attack. The town of Log cannot be held out any longer. If they are given more time to wear down the defending forces, they will be unable to hold out at all. Even 8 Tier 2 minions would be crushed by hundreds of elite minotaurs." The bull, who was resting with its eyes closed, was awakened by a commotion. The heavy footsteps outside revealed the panic and helplessness of the people. He easily barged into the tent. It was clear this guy was one of their own and held a high position within the tribe. Instead of asking him what had happened, the bull went over and closed the tent tightly. "What happened in the tribe that made you rush over here?" The warrior before them was somewhat incoherent. He was a Tier 1 warrior who had been deliberately left behind by the rangers. He had witnessed firsthand how his tribe had been turned upside down by a few rangers. Boss, our tribe was attacked by several elves and suffered heavy losses." "Speak properly, I'm still here." Perhaps it was the presence of the chief that made him realize that the tribe could still be saved and that there was still hope. He finally calmed down and recounted the tribe's plight. "So that means our tribe's hundreds of elite warriors were attacked by a group of only about 10 people." The bull exuded an imposing aura without being angry, its heavy presence causing the surrounding air to fall silent. "Boss, it's not that the brothers didn't try their best, it's just that they launched a sneak attack and there were several Tier 2 experts among them. The bull's face darkened. What nonsense about second tier. These were no excuses for these guys to be so careless. Of those who remained, all the second-tier survivors were killed and only a few first-tier survivors remained, if other tribes find out. Like Viscount Northwind, the Minotaur tribe was also viewed with hostility by other major tribes. If one of their small tribes becomes a guide, their homeland will be completely destroyed. Thinking of this, Man Niu immediately ordered the entire army to set off, preferring to cease hostilities and recuperate rather than cause trouble again in order to ensure the survival of the tribe. Outside the tent, a dozen or so tribal chiefs gathered around, clearly wanting to know what had happened. Anything that could cause a Tauran warrior to panic must be no small matter. Faced with numerous questions from his subordinates, Man Niu knew he couldn't show weakness at this moment. It's just a few human traces on our territory, nothing to worry about. He waved his hand, refusing to discuss the elves. However, he shouldn't even think about continuing the attack right now. He only has this many men and he can't accept any significant losses. Especially that Lord, his swordsmanship capable of killing with a single strike is still too terrifying. Heaven knows if he has enough men to kill him. He said casually, "Isn't Viscount Northwind's scouts always watching us? Let him go and inform the Viscount that we want to see him. As for the next few days, we will postpone our attack." Although we don't know what got into him, not bleeding is ultimately a good thing for the people of the small tribe. As for the reason, perhaps this guy felt sorry for his soldiers. His move gave Log Town a precious respite, but it wasn't good news for Ethan either. Within a day, the pile of corpses beneath the city wall emitted a terrible stench, with countless bacteria and viruses spreading within it. In this region with scarce medical resources, even a simple flu can easily destroy a territory and several tribes. Originally, there were no doctors in Log Town. Such individuals were extremely rare, even among slaves. Fortunately, this problem has been temporarily resolved. Tell me about your years of medical experience and my natural magic. The presence of the rangers greatly reduced the soldiers' chances of infection, significantly increasing their survival rate. If it weren't for the fact that it could be cured, the disease alone could have destroyed this newly born territory. The good news is that the weather hasn't reached its peak heat yet and the orcs don't have enough food. Based on experience, the orcs carry no more than 5 days' worth of rations, the rest they rely on plunder or cannibalism. They couldn't possibly steal corpses right under the guards' noses. Even without bows and arrows, such an act would be tantamount to suicide. Before the Minotaur's gazes toward the other beastmen grew increasingly hostile, the bull and the Viscount finally met. "You brute, you're not trying to blackmail me with an attack again, are you? Let me tell you, the assistance I've given you is all I can offer." Viscount Northwind's tone was very unfriendly. This guy had extorted him many times before and each time he had reluctantly agreed. "This time I need you to work with me lest things get complicated," the bull said in a deep voice. Viscount Northwind's expression turned serious and he said, word by word earnestly, "You know this is impossible." This was the bottom line he had to adhere to. If anyone were to spread this news, not only would he be out of a promotion, but he would also lose his title. Then our cooperation is doomed. The Viscount was disgusted by his nonchalant attitude, which was clearly just a ploy to annoy him. He asked patiently, "What trouble have you gotten yourself into this time? Don't tell me your mother died and you're going back for her funeral." The bull was completely unaffected by his ineffective attack. After all, its hide was incredibly thick. But this time, things really went wrong. The elves got together with this guy and attacked my tribe when I wasn't looking. Although he has no evidence, exaggeration is always good. So I'm short-handed and need your help. The bull spread his hands and told the Viscount about his difficulties. "This is a matter of principle. Once word gets out, even the king himself couldn't save me. In that case, there's nothing to discuss." The two looked at each other, each with their own reasons for not backing down. In this situation, it's time for someone to take the lead and express their sincerity. Viscount Northwind was used to being the weaker party, but surprisingly, it was the bull who spoke first. "After this is accomplished, I require that you remain within 3 years and help our tribe consolidate its position." 3 years is enough time for the beastmen who reproduce at an astonishing rate to recover their strength. at which point the Minotaur tribe can maintain its status. Since he had yielded first, the Viscount didn't intend to make things difficult for him, but he had something to mention. After this war ends, the soldiers under my command who participated will all know the truth, as will my several knights. I'll need your help then. The bull nodded slightly and the transaction was considered complete. For the sake of the Collin family's future, these loyal subordinates who had served them for generations could only become insignificant sacrifices. The Viscount's behavior was nothing short of madness. If even a single word of it reached the ears of a nobleman, he would be doomed. In fact, if he had just taken his time, he would have found a reason to declare war on Log Town sooner or later, but he couldn't wait any longer. Ethan's growth rate has exceeded his expectations. One of his elite troops and 2 second-tier knights have already fallen to Ethan. Although he still had troops that could theoretically overwhelm Log Town, he wanted to eliminate them completely. Having absolute certainty, once the Viscount made up his mind, his execution was terrifyingly efficient. Despite the reluctance of his men and the constant dissuasion from his knights, a rapidly marching army arrived in Log Town just 2 days later. Many other lords along the way discovered their movements and were eventually killed by them. They were just passing bandits. The Viscount's orders to them were simple: rush into the town at all costs and cut off the lord's head to show him. For the first time in a century, beastmen and humans have joined forces on this ancient land. The objective is to deal with the other human race. This event is also recorded in the history books of the Badeson Empire. Legend has it that King Batterson VII once joined forces with the orcs to suppress a rebellion by local lords. The orcs, as allies, met a less than ideal fate. They were simply confined to the borders for generations, never to enter the empire again. Without any pause, thousands of elite armed soldiers and Minotaur warriors launched a clear-cut charge towards the city walls. Unlike the barbaric and backward beastmen, the Collin family, as descendants of military nobility, still retains the skills and equipment of warfare. Instead of charging headlong into the orcs, they used their equipment to encircle and trap Log Town within. With its already limited military strength, the town of Log was simply unable to defend against such an offensive. So after the final wave of falling rocks and giant trees, Rasu ordered everyone to abandon the city walls and gather together to rely on the last line of defense. Fortunately, they had anticipated this situation. Viscount Northwind had always been one of their hypothetical enemies. Centered around Ethan's Lord's stone house, a relatively small defensive line was constructed. Although the wooden barricades would eventually be breached by new equipment, they were their last resort. On the small, sprawling battlefields, the Rangers displayed their dominance, each arrow easily claiming the life of an enemy, which only intensified Viscount Northwind's urgency. Without waiting for new equipment, they charged towards the defensive line, not caring about the spikes, pouring their lives into it, thinking that stepping on corpses would make them forget the pain. The serfs were placed in the middle of the parade ground and given weapons. If the soldiers in front of them could not hold them off, they would have to fight for their lives. If we have to talk about their combat strength, the fact that they are always well-fed and constantly working gives them a bit more strength than ordinary conscripts, but that's all. Ethan never arranged training for the militia, and he had too few junior officers under his command so that perhaps only a few would emerge after the war ended. That is, if they can survive. All available forces had been deployed, leaving only Ethan to bid Wolf a final farewell. Theoretically, they had a slight chance of survival, since the opposing coalition forces without proper coordination were prone to infighting. Moreover, their morale is low. However, Ethan wasn't entirely confident that he would survive the war. If his body can fully recover, he can still take a gamble and temporarily break through to the 3rd tier. But now, the opportunity is gone. He stroked Wolf's head and said in a deep voice, "If you really can't hold on any longer, just pretend you're a wolf passing by. You said wolves have a high status among the beastmen, they won't harm you." Wolf reached out and took his hands in hers, placing them against her chest. "I won't leave, the wolves and I will always protect you." Ethan covered her mouth with his hand. "Listen to me, I've already wronged you. This is Master's order." For the first time, she openly defied Ethan's words. Using the strength of her wolf pack, she broke free from his grasp and said, word by word, "You said it yourself, we are husband and wife." After saying this, she turned and left, and the wolf pack would carry out the Wolf King's orders. On this cruel land, Ethan was her only support and attachment, and she would never allow herself to live alone. Wolf's favorability has increased to 100, unwavering loyalty, and the loyal wolf guard skill has gained a new trait: fight to the death. Fight to the death. When a territory enters a state of war, the morale of all members of the territory remains at full value until the lord dies. Morale provides numerous benefits, not only preventing troop collapse but also significantly boosting combat effectiveness. The chance of survival has increased from less than 10% to at least 15%. Ethan was never afraid of death. In his view, every year he lived in this world was a bonus and he should have died long ago. That's why he's always been very bold in his actions. He'd rather give them his worthless life at worst. But at that moment, he suddenly felt that the world still had hope for him. So many people are risking their lives for me, I shouldn't and can't just sit here and wait to die. Rasu rushed in, dragging his blood-soaked, tattered armor. His sword was broken and covered in yellow and red fat and blood. "Master, we're about to fall, let me lead you out." Ethan met his bloodshot eyes and chuckled softly. "What about the others?" "We'll cover for you, sir. With your abilities, we believe you'll avenge us sooner or later." K your mother. Ethan uttered a curse word. "They're just a bunch of orcs and soldiers, watch me push them back." He drew a snow-white silver sword, a gift from his teacher. Only by comprehending the essence of swordsmanship can one unleash the full power of this sword. His teacher had said those words to him personally, and even now he still doesn't understand what sword intent is. But now, he seems to understand a little bit. Ethan, clad in armor, pushed open the door and focused all his fighting spirit into the sword. What was this sword called again? It seems to be called Silver Dragon. Let's call this sword strike the Roar of the Silver Dragon. With a single sword strike, the allied forces that had advanced to the gate were cleared out within a 20-meter radius, with limbs and severed bodies flying everywhere. Exhausted, Alice collapsed to the ground, watching Ethan walk past her. "In the name of the Lord of Logtown, I will protect everyone within my territory." A clear voice echoed across the silent battlefield. Finally, he added quietly, "Including you, Jinshuang. You bastards of the Bull tribe and Viscount Northwind, face me." None of the allied forces dared to step forward. Ethan's sword strike had exceeded their expectations. While extraordinary abilities were an important asset on the battlefield, they had never seen a single person decide the course of a war. Although Ethan was nearing exhaustion, his very presence was the best proof of that. The raging bulls stirred up the battlefield once again. "Men, kill this knight." The leader's word is absolute. Viscount Northwind's orders were also relayed by his knights. "Whoever obtains the corpse of the opposing lord will be rewarded with 100 gold coins and a knighthood." The second wave has begun. Rasu raised a longsword he had just picked up and shouted, "For Log Town." Having just gained a respite, the soldiers rallied together, determined to fight to the death and regroup. When they form small squads, they can unleash a fighting force equivalent to 2 to 3 times the number of people, enough to create small meat grinders on the battlefield. The Allied forces poured in through countless gaps in the defensive line and engaged them in battle. Faced with an overwhelming numerical disadvantage, the defending forces suffered repeated defeats, but they weren't without anything behind them. They were soldiers but also citizens of Log Town and family, friends, and relatives to others. "We shouldn't just sit here and wait to die." One of the group leaders raised his pitchfork and loudly urged everyone to take action and fight the orcs to the death. In the face of disaster, fear is a biological instinct, but the innate courage of humankind led the first person to step forward. He wanted to protect his children and wife. Even though he had nothing, it was better than having nothing at all. The herd mentality isn't entirely a bad thing. At least, led by a few individuals, the able-bodied men began to shield the weak and take up what weren't really weapons to fight the orcs. As long as they don't wear armor, orcs are no different from ordinary humans. They feel pain just like everyone else and they die just like everyone else. Wild Bull and Viscount Northwind personally stepped onto the battlefield, their gaze fixed on the only open space amidst the chaos. Within 10 meters of where Ethan stood, not a single man dared to challenge his authority. The bull roared, its muscles bulging, and it grew to over 3 meters tall, becoming a true monster. At this point, he was already very close to reaching the Third Order. As for Viscount Northwind, although he was of a slender build among the border nobles, he was still a seasoned second-tier knight, having inherited the position of family head. Faced with the approaching bull wielding a giant axe, Ethan remained standing still, his hands braced against the silver dragon, unmoving. He is doing his best to recover his strength. The bull roared at the sky once more, and all the high-ranking warriors of the Beastmen gathered around. He maintained the necessary caution. He swung his axe forward. Kill him? Several orc warriors immediately pounced on them. Just as the attack was about to pounce on the unmoved Ethan, several dark figures appeared and blocked it. A large pack of desert wolves pounced. Even though their individual combat strength was weaker than that of the extraordinary, their numerical advantage still caught the orcs off guard. The Viscount could wait no longer. He led the last few first-rank knights of the Colin family and charged straight past the wolf pack toward Ethan. "Do not harm my lord." He was stopped by Rasu, while the other knights were blocked by Afen and Joe. Seeing Rasu's armor twisted and deformed, his body dripping with blood, the Viscount couldn't help but ask, "Do you really intend to come up here to your death?" Beifeng saw it clearly. This guy's strength was among the bottom of the second tier, not to mention his current state. Even in his prime, he wouldn't be a match for him. Rasu remained silent, only breathing heavily. His life wasn't given to him by the master, but he had completely entrusted it to him. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said coldly, "A scum of humanity like you wouldn't understand." These words thoroughly enraged the Viscount. He could accept any insults, but he absolutely could not accept being excommunicated, because he truly colluded with the orcs. "You wretched dog, you have no idea about the Colin family's centuries of hard work and dedication." He used the swordsmanship passed down in the Colin family, and within a few rounds he forced Rasu into a retreat. Ethan's face was grim and the power in his hands was steadily building up, almost there. The consumption of sword intent was greater than he had imagined. It truly lived up to its reputation as a skill that required reaching the third rank to be fully utilized. He only has enough strength left to swing his sword once. The second sword strike requires a short recovery period before it can be unleashed, and finally the user is completely exhausted. But even this short period of time felt as long as an insurmountable chasm. He watched as the wolf pack fell, Rasu coughed up blood from the beating, and the warriors were felled one after another. A giant axe swung towards him. After confirming that Ethan was unable to move, Bull finally decided to take matters into his own hands. Ethan was forced to take a few steps back, and he could barely hold onto the silver dragon in his hands. Then he suddenly remembered a reference to the story of bullets and medals and pocket watches. The wolves and Rasu have already each shielded themselves from one attack. Will there be another? Although he could fight the bull to a standstill even without unleashing his sword intent, but this obviously doesn't help on the battlefield. Alice fired her last arrow, the sharp bolt lodging itself in the bull's neck, unable to penetrate further. "You be *****D, you said you'd protect me. I think I'm the one protecting you." Ethan gritted his teeth and said, "Thank you very much, Miss Elf." Alice stared at the enormous minotaur before her, her anger flaring. This was the man who had murdered her companions, and she would never forgive him, even though her recent attack had already drained the little strength she had just recovered. But fueled by her anger, she fought the bull to a standstill with just a short knife. His size became a hindrance to the bull, making it difficult for the agile ranger to hit him. Even if she were dancing on the edge of a knife, Alice was still absolutely confident that she could bleed him to death. Having dodged another attack, Alice was about to seize the opportunity to counterattack. The bull surprisingly released the axe and gripped the short knife tightly with its hands. With just a casual tug, Alice fell to the ground. She tried to get up, but her body, which had been constantly exploited, refused to move and she couldn't get up at all. The bull let out a savage laugh. This elf was about to be crushed into fresh mincemeat, which would allow him to properly replenish his strength. Right in front of her lord, Ethan, standing not far away, gritted his teeth. Damn it, just a little bit more, just a tiny bit more. But he saw that the bull had already reached out its hand. He didn't want to regret it. Swish! A silver sword flashed and one of the bull's arms shot into the sky. Ethan struggled to keep his legs from collapsing and he closed his eyes. If only we could do it again. A fine head flew up. A jet of blood spurted out, the steaming blood staining the ground red. Ethan stood there, too weak to even open his eyes, his whole body racked with pain. Alice stared at him blankly. The man before her was unbelievably strong. Ethan tore open his dry, cracked lips. I said I would protect. Before he could finish speaking, Ethan's body collapsed, lying flat in Alice's arms. Wolf, who had just dispatched all the Steppenwolves, arrived to find Ethan collapsed. "Young master," she called out, but the young lord was unable to respond to her for the time being. "Ethan." She stood there, stunned, unable to believe that the young master who had always been so confident and composed had actually collapsed. Her bloodshot eyes widened. She had seen this scene before. 2 years ago, I watched my companions and their mounts fall in the same way. The wolf she had raised for many years shielded her from a fatal blow, lying on the ground whimpering as it let her escape. The noisy battlefield was silenced. At this moment her eyes were only on that one person she could rely on. Her heart pounded suddenly as she saw an enemy attempting to attack the fallen Ethan. No, she absolutely wouldn't allow it. Before anyone knew it, the wood-chopping knife in her hand had pierced through the beastman in front of her. She didn't want to run away, she didn't want to lose anything more. Behind Wolf, a massive silver wolf figure gradually materialized. The orcs take pride in their ancestors and hold totems as their symbol of faith. They worship animals, though this did not prevent them from evolving towards human form. Wolf's eyes turned ice blue in an instant, and her aura surged dramatically. Under the influence of this aura, Little Grey's body also underwent a drastic change. With a painful howl, its size instantly increased to over 2.5 meters tall. At this moment, it was stronger than an ordinary dire wolf, becoming a true magical beast, but it managed to suppress the urge to howl. Its owner was eerily calm, so it was best not to disturb her. In the Orcish system, the third tier should be called a totem warrior. According to the wolf tribe's classification, it is called a silver wolf. Wolf leaped lightly onto the back of her mount. "I won't lose it again," she murmured while Ethan, lying behind her, remained unmoved. He then gave Alice a warning look, "Protect the young master." Wolf squeezed her legs together, and Little Grey carried her into the still chaotic battlefield. Just as Viscount Northwind was about to finish off the defenseless Rasu in front of him, a flash of silver light streaked past, and his entire body was now hanging on Wolf's blade, swaying violently. A piercing pain shot through him as his body was repeatedly slashed by the sharp blade. The Viscount was flung to the ground by Wolf like a kite with a broken string. Blood spilled from the Northwind's mouth. The gruesome wound on his chest had only one possible outcome in this era. The massive blood loss left his body powerless in a short time. He lay on top of several beastmen corpses, his pupils somewhat dilated. He couldn't believe he had died so easily. He uttered a few words here and there which together formed the phrase third-tier elite. Elite ranks are pillars of strength across the entire continent, and even among the strongest forces they are considered a core force. A high status implies rarity, talent, and the inability to be mass-produced. A third-tier being had never been born on this small piece of land before, and a bleak smile appeared on the Viscount's face. However, he wondered, when did the Collin family offend the Joel family, so much so that they went so far as to send a third-rank official promising him the title of Earl? Yes, that young man. I should have realized it sooner. The son of a noble family came here only to covet a large and prosperous estate. The only thing they would even consider in this area is themselves. I can only blame my bad luck. They became pointless victims. His retainers remained absolutely loyal, risking death to try and reclaim the Viscount's body. Wolf's weapon, resembling a woodcutter's axe, moved like a ghost around them, and within minutes, his confidants, including several first-tier knights, were all dead. Northwind remained lying in the same spot, listening to the familiar voices all around him, their roars of charge and their screams of impending death, his expression unchanged. These are all perfectly reasonable. As retainers, this was what they were supposed to do. As losers, this was the price they had to pay. He tried to say something, but he had no strength left. All he could manage were muffled sounds. After admiring all of this, Wolf chopped off his head with her machete. At this point, both of the enemy's leaders had perished. Logically, the enemy should have surrendered at this point, since without their leader they were merely waging a pointless war. They want to do that too. But they saw a girl riding a giant wolf wielding a weapon and relentlessly slaughtering soldiers on the battlefield. The terrifying power chilled the soldiers to the bone, while the orcish race's identity made the Minotaurs hesitate. Finally, Viscount Northwind's soldiers all deserted, abandoning their weapons as they fled in panic. The slaughtered Minotaurs chose to kneel, awaiting judgment from those in power. This tedious slaughter eventually disgusted the bloodthirsty wolf, and she had no interest in submissive followers who only knelt and waited for death. These guys chose to submit to you. After thinking for a moment, she told the Minotaurs to stay behind and clean up the battlefield before returning to await her arrival. Although she really wanted to kill all the guys who were attacking her territory, she should consider her young master's thoughts first. Knowing Ethan as she did, she believed in making the most of resources. "Oh, right, young master." She looked at Alice, who was using her newly recovered magic to heal Ethan. Her gaze grew even colder. "If anything happens to the young master, I'll hold you responsible." After saying that, she ignored Alice, since the ranger was more authoritative than her in the field of healing. Besides, with the young master absent, the territory needs another person to take charge. Alice pursed her lips and tightened her spell. She wasn't going to pay for this frivolous guy's life. Wolf displayed extraordinary leadership skills. The knights respected her status, and the soldiers witnessed her abilities firsthand. With the added title of mistress, Wolf became the true mistress of the land. She is very good at handling the aftermath of battles, which was her main job as a newcomer to the tribe. She ordered the orc corpses to be completely burned, and not even their heads were left. With Viscount Northwind dead, Ethan will have no rivals for the time being, and he won't be short of military merit. Most importantly, we must not leave any source of disease transmission, which is something that is difficult for any territory to deal with. She had personally witnessed how one of her tribes had unfortunately contracted the plague, and how the wolf tribe had burned them all to death. Truly reduced to ashes. Therefore, she showed no respect not only to the dead but also to the living, forcing them to take a thorough bath. The battle in Log Town was extremely devastating. The soldiers' courage in fighting to the death rather than retreating was indeed commendable, but it also resulted in a higher mortality rate. Of the soldiers who survived in Log Town, only 200 remained. Half of the serfs in the territory had sacrificed themselves for them. The population of Log Town has plummeted again, but that's not a problem. Ethan sensed a glimmer of light in the long darkness, which forced him to open his eyes. The moment he woke up, he felt an excruciating pain, as if his body was being shattered. The aftereffects of overworking his body are still too much for him to bear at present. He opened his mouth and a thin, sticky membrane tore open, revealing streaks of blood. "Hey, cough, cough." Alice, who was dozing off by his bedside, was startled awake, and a smile involuntarily appeared on her face. "You're awake." Ethan turned his head and asked weakly, "Where's Wolf?" Alice's smile vanished. "I'll go call her for you." After saying that, she got up to leave the place where she had stayed for 3 days. Ethan grabbed her hand. "Ha. I was just kidding, I'm really happy to see you." Snort. She turned back, pouting to express her dissatisfaction, but the expression on her face betrayed her true feelings. "I'll get you some water." Unbeknownst to her, Wolf nodded in satisfaction before leaving the room. "You can have the young master for now, she's very generous." Ethan licked his lips, which had just been wet with water. He felt weak all over, and this state might last a long time as punishment for his willfulness. However, this gave him a plausible identity, a frail patient. Alice is indeed a kind child. She has been worried about him constantly during the days he was in a coma. As for how I knew, her favorability rating had risen to 62 in the past few days. Well, theoretically speaking, it's about liking it. "Would you like something to eat?" Alice asked with concern. I don't have the energy right now, I want to sleep a little longer." Alice stretched. "In that case, I'll go take a nap too, these past few days." Hey. Ethan grabbed her hand and forcefully pulled her onto the bed. "Sleep with me," Ethan said with his eyes closed. Alice's face turned completely red, but Ethan's hands held her tightly, making it difficult for her to move. Looking at Ethan, who remained unmoved with his eyes closed, she hesitated for a long time before whispering, "If you lay a hand on me, I won't forgive you." Ethan consciously refrained from doing anything excessive. These things are best done slowly. Forcing himself on someone is not his choice. It's more enjoyable to gently guide the other person to say things that are embarrassing. The key issue is that he hasn't fully recovered yet. Amidst vigilance and caution, Alice gradually gave up resisting, yawned, and fell asleep with Ethan. The elf, who had finally had a good night's sleep, decided to stay in bed a little longer than usual, but Ethan wasn't about to let her off easily. She felt an itch in her sleep, and when she woke up, she found Ethan pinching her cheek. "Pervert!" She uttered the two words, but her body didn't move at all. Ethan then pinched it again. "Really? You seem to be enjoying it." The ashamed and indignant elf slapped his hand away, jumped up from the bed, and made as if to leave. "Are you leaving so soon?" These words enraged Alice even more. "You be ****D. I've already stayed with you, what more do you want?" Ethan replied innocently, "I had no choice. I ended up like this because I was saving someone. Are you going to abandon me so soon?" "Then what else do you want? What happened yesterday is absolutely unacceptable. Take care of me until I'm fully recovered." It sounded like a very reasonable request, and to repay his life-saving grace, Alice agreed without hesitation. However, the situation was not quite what she had expected. Dressed in a black and white maid outfit, she stood before Ethan, asking with a mixture of shame and indignation, "I can accept wearing this. But why do I have to wear these white stockings too?" Ethan glanced at her with obvious enjoyment, then teased, "Don't you think you look great dressed like this?" Alice snorted and ignored the pervert. "As for why you wear it, even if you don't like it, it's best not to ask. Now, come and massage my shoulders." Alice couldn't help but snap, "How can I massage you while you're lying down? There's no way I can sit up right now. If you don't want to, I won't force you." The elven maid took a deep breath, knelt on the bed, and warned, "Don't try anything funny." Then he began to gently massage Ethan's shoulders. Ethan lay there motionless, his eyes blindfolded. "I didn't realize it before, but now I suddenly realize. This guy is indeed very well off. Judging from its appearance, it seems a little bigger than usual. Considering that she often needs to shoot arrows as a wandering knight, it makes sense for her to wear a chest binder. After all, what if the bowstring is accidentally snapped?" Belatedly realizing what was happening, Alice pinched his shoulder hard and then stopped serving him. As time went by, Alice gradually became indifferent to this blatant covetousness. When she occasionally saw that kind of look, she simply ignored it silently. She had gotten used to looking at that pervert with the eyes of someone looking at trash, but Ethan was enjoying it. Anyway, Alice has completely accepted the fact that he's a scumbag. Regardless of the process, his feelings for Alice steadily grew stronger when no one was around to disturb them. "I said you're almost fully recovered, are you going to keep lying down?" Alice, completely ignoring Ethan playing with her little hand, said with a serious expression. Ethan gently massaged her small hands, replying cheerfully, "Almost there, almost there. I think I'll be fully recovered by tomorrow." After saying that, he teased in a sarcastic tone, "Then you'll be able to take these clothes off." Alice turned her head away. "You ungrateful wretch, you're always pushing your luck." Ethan placed her hand in front of his nose and took a careful breath under her murderous gaze. "These are all facts. You don't need to keep praising me." He stood up, a rare occurrence for him. "Now I'm giving you my final order. Give me a hug, Jin Shuang." Looking at the handsome young man with a sunny smile, Alice hesitated for a moment, then gently hugged him. She then tried to extricate herself, but to no avail. Ethan hugged her tightly, just as he had expected from the touch. Jin Shuang's body was much softer than Wolf's. Perhaps it's innate, or it could be due to Wolf's years of training. Her slight struggles revealed her resistance, but the unmoving hands held her firmly in place, unable to move. After a long while, she leaned against Ethan's chest and said in a slightly pleading tone, "It's time to let go." "Not yet." Ethan took her back to bed. "Stay with me one more night." He. Alice muttered something, making an indistinct sound. "What's wrong?" A soft voice drifted over, "You're stepping on my hair." I had no choice but to let go. It would be rather impolite to keep hugging her. Alice sat up and fiddled with her messy hair while Ethan waited awkwardly for her to leave. As is customary, she would mutter B********* D under her breath and then leave. However, the plot rarely unfolds as expected. In the darkness, Ethan couldn't see her face clearly, but from her movements, the shy elf's face flushed again. At least, let me take off my shoes. The weather wasn't so cold anymore, and the two of them, still fully clothed, were embracing each other, inevitably feeling a bit hot. What made Alice even more uneasy was her fear that Ethan might do something when she wasn't looking. After all, he had previously asked her to wear stockings while he massaged her back. He was a complete pervert. Although I did step on it for him. This time she rested her head on Ethan's arm, not worried about her hair being pinned down. However, looking at Ethan so close by, her thoughts drifted elsewhere. What is her relationship with him now? Her emerald green eyes revealed confusion. Companions, they don't seem that close. Master and servant, that's even more impossible. She's just temporarily taking care of him. A large hand pinched her cheek. What are you thinking about? No, it's nothing. She didn't even realize that she was tightening her grip on Ethan's arm. If you're all right, I have something to tell you. Go ahead and say it. Her gaze darted around, trying to avoid Ethan's eyes. She could sense that Ethan's face was getting closer. Finally, their foreheads touched and Alice's gaze had nowhere to escape. I like you. The naive elf was stunned. She hadn't expected Ethan's attack to be so sudden, swift, and deadly. She wanted to say something, but after a brief hesitation, she couldn't utter a word because Ethan had already pressed his lips against hers. Alice's body suddenly lost all strength, and she could only let Ethan continue to take what he wanted. After a long while, Ethan reluctantly separated, the two of them leaving behind a silvery thread. Wolf's wolf ears twitched. She heard something she shouldn't have. Despite being prepared, she couldn't help but feel sullen. Having eavesdropped at the door for 2 hours, she stomped her foot angrily and turned to leave. Alas, my incompetent wife. To avoid Ethan's next attack, Alice buried her head against his chest. He was muttering curses under his breath, calling the B******* D a jerk. This guy is so unreasonable. How could he just do that? This was not quite what she had expected. Ethan teased Alice's pointed ears. He had no intention of letting this tender, juicy elf go so easily. Alice's body trembled with each tease. Don't continue, she pleaded. Weren't you very arrogant before, calling me a B****** D all the time? Why aren't you continuing now? I'm sorry, Ethan. Ethan pinched her earlobe hard. Call me young master. Young master. Alice finished speaking with considerable embarrassment, then lay motionless in his arms. Ethan assumed she was done flirting and was ready to sleep with her. A warm current emanated from her stockings. The heat, clearly higher than body temperature, immediately alerted Ethan, who was sitting right next to her. This was the first time he had ever seen anything like it. It's so juicy. Thanks to you, we were able to survive. You've worked so hard these past few days. Wolf enjoyed Ethan's caresses, and even the slight resentment that had arisen in the past few days vanished. So what if the young master is a glutton? He still loves himself. What reward would you like? Wolf hesitated for a moment, then hugged Ethan and tentatively expressed her wish. I want to do something big. I can't agree to that. The wolf girl visibly wilted. She hadn't expected the young master to still prefer the elf who looked so much bigger. What I mean is, you're already the big one. You deserve a different reward. Wolf regained her usual liveliness. Then I want the young master to stay with me forever. Ethan cupped her cheeks in his hands. You saved my life. You can do whatever you want with me. Upon hearing this, Wolf's tail wagged rapidly with excitement. She used her overwhelming strength to grab Ethan's hands and successfully pushed him down. Today will be a very rigorous squatting practice. She breathed hot air into Ethan's ear. Then today, young master is my prey all to come. Since a second-tier unit can't defeat a third-tier unit, it can only be manipulated by others, which makes perfect sense, right? Afterwards, Ethan, who had a week's worth of supplies, successfully fed a hungry wolf cub. This is a battle against a higher level. After successfully comforting his lonely wife, Ethan needed to properly handle the affairs of the territory. Although Wolf carried out his ideas well during the week he was bedridden, there were still many things that needed his personal supervision. At the border, the transmission of messages is always slow. But the disappearance of Viscount Northwind within a week is enough to raise suspicions. However, the Collin family maintained absolute control over Northwind City on the surface, which prevented other nobles from harboring any dissenting thoughts. After all, perhaps the Viscount is just suffering from a minor cold and is temporarily ill. At least in this region, no one has dared to challenge the Viscount's authority. Unbeknownst to them, all the key members of the Collin family had secretly fled without their knowledge. Viscount Northwind was smart enough not to gamble everything on the alliance with the orcs. The remaining elite force will escort the main family members and young bloodlines to the heart of the empire. Although they will lose their noble status, they will still have no worries about their future life thanks to the wealth they have accumulated over the years. There will be opportunities in the future to reclaim the glory that belongs to the nobility. That's what they think. The long, winding convoy was protected by a group of elite soldiers armed to the teeth. The worst among them were seasoned veterans. There were over 100 heavily armored infantrymen and even 30 cavalrymen. "Father, why do we suddenly want to go to the central part of the empire?" The middle-aged man referred to as father forced a smile. "This is a family trip arranged together." "Then why doesn't Grandpa go?" The innocent child asked, naive as he had never considered what death and conquest were. "Grandpa, he has to stay and oversee things. Your uncle is sick and he wants to help him with these tasks." "Oh." The child blinked his clear eyes and he began to look forward to what lay ahead. He just wondered why the procession was moving so slowly. He really wanted it to move faster. Just then the group suddenly stopped and a loud shout came from ahead. "There are enemies." The soldiers at the front immediately formed a defensive line, while the heavy infantry behind them were rapidly donning their armor. The cavalry, in addition to relaying the message, also planned to assess the strength of this group. Before they even got close, several arrows claimed their lives, leaving only a few horses galloping alone ahead. Wolf, combing her little gray, glossy fur, said seemingly casually, "Let's settle this with these guys. Whoever loses has to call the other older sister." Alice looked at the wolf girl who was half a head shorter than her, and a competitive spirit rose spontaneously within her. She didn't want to call this guy, who was even younger than her, older sister. Even if Ethan acknowledges it, it's not acceptable. Behind them stood several swordsmen poised to attack. Faced with the imposing aura emanating from the two powerful women, none of them intended to intervene. On one side is the Lord's legal wife and on the other is his own elder sister. He can't afford to offend either of them. It's just hateful that the young Lord, having one wife wasn't enough, he actually managed to win the favor of his own elder sister. They still couldn't persuade them. Whether it was her best friend or her childhood friend, all attempts at persuasion ultimately resulted in the response, "I've made up my mind." An elf will only have one mate for its entire life. They had no choice but to accept this decision, which meant that if they didn't intend to part ways with Alice, they would probably have to work for Ethan indefinitely. The knight commander protecting the convoy had already noticed something amiss. "These guys in front of me all seem to be quite strong." He had never heard of any archers in this area capable of killing cavalry, so only fleeing elves remained. "I've heard that there are quite a few second-tier beings among them." The knight gripped the reins tightly and ordered his troops to advance in a defensive formation. When facing archers, forming a tortoise formation is the best strategy. The heavily armored soldiers formed 3 rows, raising their shields to create an impenetrable human wall, and slowly advanced. The knight's idea was simple. He didn't want to wipe them out completely. Scaring them away first was the best course of action. Having received the Viscount's will, he had no intention of jeopardizing the future of the entire Collin family. This was the people to whom he and his ancestors had served for generations, and he would risk his life to ensure their safe arrival at their destination. Wolf glanced smugly at the elf beside her, then squeezed her legs together, and Little Gray on her steed galloped away. The knight, who was on high alert, could only see a black dot rushing towards them in the distance. As it got closer, he gradually became able to make out the true appearance of the figure, a wolf rider. Even though there was only one, the impact etched deep in his memory still made his heart skip a beat for a moment. As a child, he witnessed how a pack of wolf riders slaughtered the entire city of Northwind. Stand still and defend. The sound had barely reached them when Wolf easily broke through the heavily armored infantry who hadn't even had a chance to form ranks. The knight's heart was in his throat. Even Wolf riders could only suffer defeat when surrounded by heavily armored infantry. But things didn't turn out as he hoped. Soon after, a figure carrying a silver wolf broke out of the encirclement, followed by countless fallen warriors. Blood stained little Gray's fur, and it was driven to charge the convoy. Wherever she went, even the most elite warriors could not stop Wolf for a moment. The machete in his hand was more efficient than the Grim Reaper's scythe, and the fear was far greater. In contrast, even if an arrow hits its mark every time, it is not necessarily fatal. With the fall of their most loyal guards, the remaining troops quickly collapsed under the shock of heavy casualties. As for the remaining protected nobles and their families, Wolf was never one to hold back. The final result was that Wolfsburg led by a huge margin with a total of 86 players. She stood with her hands on her hips, smugly waiting for Alice to give in. Alice lowered her head and reluctantly uttered the words, "Sister Wolf." Wolf raised her hand and patted her head. "Sweetie, your sister won't make things difficult for you." Despite her deep reluctance, Alice accepted this sister who was not related to her by blood. On one hand, they were inferior in strength on the other hand. Wolf did indeed arrive first. Deep down, she still felt guilty towards Wolf if one disregarded the fact that Ethan had taken a liking to her first. With the destruction of this caravan, the core of the Collin family also perished. The remaining garrison in Northwind City is nothing but a bunch of weaklings. The wandering knights could easily take them down. What Ethan needs to do is to take over Northwind City before the other nobles in the Northwind region figure out his strength. With the advantage of his location, no one would dare to attack him, giving him time to develop his strength. Although he suffered heavy losses, he could still use the troops he had on hand as a show of force. Ethan stroked the white fur with his left hand. "Wolf did a great job, now Northwind City is ours." Alice pushed open the door. "Ethan." She looked at the two figures pressed together, then silently retreated. "Perhaps I came at the wrong time." Ethan called out to her, "No, you've come at just the right time." Alice paused, then slowly leaned on Ethan's shoulder. "You are all my wings." A rare moment of harmony appeared, but Ethan had no idea how much suffering he would suffer later beneath this peaceful facade. When a group of over 100 people appeared at the gates of Northwind City, the city, which had stood for centuries, opened its doors to them. It wasn't that the defenders were no longer loyal to the Collin family, but rather that their commander had resigned himself to his fate. Continuing the fight would not end well. What they need is to keep their families alive. In any case, the money the Viscount gave him was enough to repay the loyalty of 2 generations of his ancestors. How many silver coins a month? You're working yourself to the bone like that. Seeing the enemy attacking instead of immediately surrendering and begging for mercy, are you really going to keep fighting? He had personally witnessed the Viscount's troops, those elite forces wiped out without a single survivor. To let them walk right up to him, especially since he hadn't seen the Viscount in a long time. Ethan took Northwind City without lifting a finger. As for those unfortunate members of the Collin family who were pushed out and willingly sacrificed themselves, their fate is self-evident. Ethan dismissed all the surrendered troops and used them as free laborers. Of course, he also made a promise as usual: as long as he worked for 3 years, he could return to his freedom. Although the soldiers were dissatisfied, they were all compromisers. If you turn them into laborers, they naturally won't want to, but if you say you'll sell them to slave traders, they'll agree to serve the great lord. The flag representing the Collin family was taken down, and the emblem belonging to Ethan was raised. Here, the change of flags is more significant than anything else. The Collin family's once arrogant soldiers have vanished, replaced by unfamiliar faces. Ethan's party entered Northwind City with impunity, venturing into the most fertile land in this region. Although panic among the citizens was inevitable, Ethan assured them that there would be no burning, killing, or looting of the residents. In the end, they ran away. There was no other way. No one dared to entrust their life to a lord of unknown origin. Ethan understood this, since many wealthy businessmen and powerful figures had the ability to flee. Their possessions and servants left in Northwind City were ruthlessly confiscated by Ethan. Regardless of their social class, let the master work the land for a few months first, and then arrange for them to join the army based on their performance. Of course, to encourage the sheep to return and produce wool for him, he announced a 50% reduction in taxes for the city this year. In addition, there was the takeover of the governance system of Northwind City. The bureaucrats who were originally loyal to Viscount Northwind defected even faster than the defending troops. When the defending commander hesitated, they heard the commotion and directly advised him to surrender. If you anger a ruthless person capable of destroying a viscount, the entire Northwind City will be doomed. Ethan was very kind to them, not only refraining from harming them but also allowing them to continue their original jobs. It was simply a change of the highest-ranking official. It was a win-win situation for everyone. The only one who was somewhat unhappy was Marcus, since Northwind City already had a governor and now he had become his assistant. Apart from the governor, Ethan placed trusted people in almost every position. It was ostensibly to relieve the pressure on officials. In reality, these veterans who have just completed their studies will completely replace them. The officials were well aware that this was the unspoken rule and that not directly targeting them was already a good outcome. I just hope that old man won't discard me after he's served his purpose. Madly, the imperial scribe in charge of registering military merits wiped the cold sweat from his brow as he asked Ethan a question he already knew the answer to. Although everyone with eyes could see what was going on, he needed to report the correct information to the Empire truthfully. Baron Ethan, what's going on? How dare you occupy a city that belongs to the Collin family without authorization? Ethan sat in the seat that originally belonged to the Viscount and poured himself a cup of tea. What did you just call me? Baron Ethan. Ethan shook his head. Back in Northwind City, I didn't mind you calling me Baron, but now that we're in the Collin family mansion, what do you think I should be called? Madly hesitated for a moment, then cautiously asked, Viscount Ethan. Ethan patted him on the shoulder. Hey, you're the scribe representing the Empire, how can you spout such nonsense? Even if I had the decree of expansion, I would still need to possess the territory of a small town to automatically be promoted to the rank of Viscount. I see. Madly replied that he already knew how to report to the Empire. Ethan added, my men seem to have seen the Viscount's men making contact with the orcs. Madly's face turned deathly pale. If that were the case, then as the scribe representing the Empire, he would certainly not escape responsibility. He turned back and forced a smile. Don't worry, Viscount, the Ethan family will take over from the Collin family. I hope our cooperation will continue. After all, we're friends. Mutual help is the most important thing. Madly closed the study door, and in the blink of an eye, he had figured out how to write a decent document and how to deal with the inspection from his superiors. Next, he would ask Marcus for specific details about the Ethan family. The system in the Badeson Empire has always been like this. In order to weaken the nobility, all independent noble branches are not allowed to use the name of the previous family. Even surnames are the same. In Ethan's full name, there are 4 surnames between Ethan and Joel. His descendants will also change their surname to Ethan, placing it after Joel. Does Viscount Ethan have any children or other elders living with him? These are important components of the Ethan family, don't you? Madly erased the notes from the paper and started a new line. Then Viscount Ethan must be married. May I ask his wife's name? What do you mean by already married but not sure how to say it? Madly looked at the experienced butler in front of him. Logically speaking, such an experienced person would not say such ambiguous things. I've heard that the Viscount has a beastman wife. What else? Marcus gave a slight bow. I apologize, but I must consult with the master on this matter. Please wait a day or two, scribe. Confused, Madly quietly withdrew. It was best not to push too hard when it came to other people's private matters. After reporting the situation to Ethan, Marcus left, leaving the master to ponder the problem himself. After all, theoretically, Ethan and the elf did not actually have a wedding. And whether 2 people of different races are qualified to have their names written in the family tree as wives is also a question. Ethan bit the tip of his pen. According to the laws of the Empire, a nobleman could only have 1 principal wife. All others could only be called concubines. There is indeed a solution to this problem, but he cannot do it yet. It's very simple. As long as the monarchy is overthrown, he can naturally change this minor law. Okay, let's assume Ethan decides to ignore any strange looks and comments and add the two outsiders to the family tree. Therefore, even a concubine needed to be witnessed to have a recognized status. Forget about having a wedding, he and Alice didn't even take the final step. She preferred to call herself master rather than compromise her last line of defense. Her reasoning was perfectly valid. A wedding was absolutely necessary. It wasn't that Ethan didn't want to do it, but the problem lay in the word witness. As the name suggests, the presence of both sets of elders is required for the marriage to be considered complete and accepted by both families. Okay, let's take a look at the family structure of three people. Alice, her elders will most likely try to stop this marriage. Wolf, her entire family was wiped out. Ethan, the most outrageous one, planned to kill his entire family. There seems to be no need for further discussion, as neither side has any witnesses. Hold. Ethan cursed under his breath, deciding to ignore these outdated customs. It's already bizarre enough that they included someone of a different ethnicity in their family tree, so it's probably normal that no one witnessed their wedding. In short, let's get the wedding done first. Before that, let Madly report the situation. Ethan set the wedding date for 3 months later in the summer. For now, let's make do with Ethan for a while. He didn't mean anything by it. He just wanted to cultivate the relationship first so that when the day came that he wouldn't have to distinguish between the first and second halves of the night, he wouldn't want to run between the two places. Alice and Wolf aren't exactly attracted to each other yet. He has become a product that is used in rotation, and he has to stay in a different room every day. Marriage is something that should naturally be announced to the world. Even though Ethan hadn't met all the nobles in the Northwind region in just 6 months, that didn't stop him from sending them invitations. The wedding was just a small part of this party. What really matters is getting them to acknowledge their place. This might be a bit too hasty. After all, the barons are not easy to deal with, and if they join forces, they can muster an army of over 1,000. But Ethan couldn't wait to absorb the resources of the entire region and expand his own power. All the beatings and losses he suffered before were worthwhile. His several brushes with danger were all for this step. Only by gaining control of the North Wind region did he have the resources to confront the Joel family's attack head-on. All members of the Collin family were executed, leaving behind vast fertile lands, estates, and most importantly, their population. After that battle, Ethan's soldiers were greatly trained and many of them were promoted to veterans. Heavy infantry, on the other hand, still need time to train. Natural warriors can save time on training but cannot be given an overly robust physique. Currently, the territory suffers from a severe shortage of mid-level forces, with heavy infantry and knight squire units being extremely rare. In small-scale battles, Ethan can win by virtue of his superior rank, but real wars are never small-scale brawls. Soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals, both sides play a decisive role on the battlefield. While there are indeed large corporations that use transcendent-level troops as ordinary soldiers, the costs are simply too high. The cost of training a Tier 1 soldier is at least 10 times that of a heavy infantryman. The former may only be twice as effective on the battlefield as the latter. The royal family of the Bateson Empire trains several extraordinary legions, in which, whether first tier or second tier, individuals can only become ordinary members of the army. However, the returns from this huge investment were also remarkable. Compared to ordinary soldiers, their superior physical qualities often enable them to achieve unexpected results. That was too far off for Ethan. What he needed to do now was feed his army, and skills couldn't magically give them superhuman muscles. In addition, the development of wolf riders should be put on the agenda. Cain and his lone wolf performed exceptionally well on the battlefield, and Wolf believed they were very close to becoming qualified wolf riders. After Wolf was promoted, more and more Steppenwolves came to join her, sometimes even 2 or 3 a day. They appeared docile under the intimidation of the third-tier Wolf King, but they still maintained their sharpness and wildness when facing soldiers who tried to tame them. Through repeated attempts, they discovered a pattern. Only a knight squire had the power to tame a wolf. Some veterans are quite talented and can gain the wolves' trust and recognition. Under Cain's guidance, these people are gradually taming this pack of wild wolves. Once the first batch of wolf riders succeeded, subsequent developments proceeded rapidly. With the Wolf King above them keeping things under control, nothing bad will happen. While Ethan recuperated and absorbed the Viscount's legacy, the other nobles in the Northwind region began to murmur amongst themselves. The Collin family, which had swaggered over them for over a century, was wiped out in a short time, all because of a newcomer. This made them hesitant to act rashly, and in their minds, Ethan had already been labeled as a highly valued heir of the Earl's family. The gap between the great nobles and the lesser nobles was so vast that it was despairing. They had already made their decision to yield to this unknown newcomer first. Saving face was unimportant, survival was the most important thing. In order to preserve their family business, they set out to offer a substantial sum of money to the new owners of Northwind City. Damn B*************. The sorcerer tumbled down from the teleportation array in the cave, the intense pain causing him to scream in agony. For demon mages, the two horns on their heads are their most important magical organs. Ethan sliced off almost half of one of them with a single sword strike, which gives you an idea of the impact on the sorcerer. Upon seeing its companion severely injured, the giant horned demon burst into laughter, a maniacal laugh. Ha ha ha, Mind Flayer, you finally met your match. What, were you hurt by some human trash? The sorcerer, gritting his teeth against the pain, said, "Go to hell, that guy's way stronger than a clumsy bumpkin like you. Why don't you give it a try?" The giant horned demon sneered, "Just a weak human trash, only good at bullying a mage like you." The sorcerer's eyes twitched, but he ultimately decided not to argue with this idiot. He patiently explained, "That was a knight with very strong perception. Let's just consider him a knight since Badeson doesn't have any other profession anyway. He's probably a viscount who rules this area, and he unleashed a sword strike at me from half a mile away. As for its power, as you can see." The giant horned demon crossed its arms, staring intently at the Mind Flayer's sharp horns, and finally even reached out to touch them. The sorcerer slapped his filthy hand away. "Don't touch me? You think you can mess with my horns?" The giant horned demon wasn't annoyed. It simply shook its head and said with certainty, "I can't do it, I can't." "Nonsense, you wouldn't listen if I told you. So this is 4th tier." The sorcerer expressionlessly pulled a book from his robes. "Don't be confused, any mage carries with them, besides their staff, their favorite book." The giant horned demon wisely refrained from disturbing him. Playing around was one thing, but the two of them were the only ones capable of getting things done here. Although they often bicker, demons also have feelings. Not long after, the sorcerer raised his head and said resentfully, "If the Badeson Empire hadn't cultivated several hundred 4th-tier individuals in just over 100 years, there wouldn't be any 4th-tier individuals on the border." The giant horned demon nodded, agreeing. If tier 4 tiers of the Empire are so common that they even exist on the borders, then the demon race will no longer consider attacking the Empire. Even in the demon realm, a 4th-tier figure is considered a major figure. Is it a little stronger than a 3rd-tier weapon? The giant horned demon pondered. Contrary to his rugged appearance, he was quite meticulous. Since Lord Iwayama warned them not to go looking for him unless absolutely necessary, it's best not to. As for the blade, let's ignore it for now. He still harbored a sliver of pride within him, the pride of the demon race. Their mission does not require human intervention. The two exchanged a glance and immediately understood what each other was thinking. Then, let's go and meet this Viscount Northwind. Their conversation went unnoticed, and the blade lying on the haystack with his eyes closed didn't pierce them. It wasn't time for him to make his move yet. Only after the two men left did he slowly sit up from the haystack. He stared at the reflection in the water in the bowl, lost in thought, when a weathered and disheveled middle-aged man came into view. "I really need to shave." He stretched out a finger and ran it across his face and chin, removing the long-accumulated grime and wildly growing stubble, as smooth as if cut with a knife. Having nothing to do, he stared blankly for a long time, eventually getting so bored that he started analyzing the actions of the two demons. North Wind, never heard of it. Never mind, let's go get something to eat. He stood up, his long, untrimmed white hair flying in the air, his blood-red eyes filled with calm and boredom. In his eyes, demons were no different from humans. They're all the same, greedy, rubbish, and rife with deceit and treachery. He was merely a loyal follower of the Demon King, barely deserving the title of a follower. Only the strongest in the world is worthy of his following. However, after this mission is over, I can go back to be with my wife. Thinking of this, a slight smile appeared on his lips. Since his reckless challenge to the Demon King years ago, he has had ample time to spend with his wife, which is good for both of them. It's much better than being busy to death back then and having to scheme and fight with all sorts of nobles around me. This is Northwind City. It doesn't seem like a much more prosperous human city than our demon city. This is the border, the most backward region of the Badeson Empire, the sorcerer said earnestly. The giant-horned demon fell silent. Just before setting off, he uttered, "How wonderful it would be if there were no war." The sorcerer didn't reply. His current peace prevented him from thinking about the past suffering in his hometown. No complicated probing is needed. The sorcerer can simply disguise himself and ask someone, and the Lord's residence will be obvious. A manor outside Northwind City. Looking at the vast and tidy manor, the giant horned demon remarked, "This Lord really knows how to enjoy life." Such scenery is extremely rare in the demon land. The sorcerer hissed, "Shut up. The more noise you make, the less effective my concealment spell will be." The giant horned demon obediently shut its mouth and remained silent, just as the two continued their observation, trying to find the Lord's whereabouts. Ethan walked straight out of the house and strolled out of the manor casually. The two demons watched him silently as he walked away from the manor without any guards by his side. Regardless, this is an excellent opportunity, the best time for them to make their move. Their long-cultivated understanding led them to make the same choice. As the sorcerer finished casting the spell enhancements on the two of them, the giant horned demon approached Ethan first. As the giant horned demon watched Ethan's figure grow larger and larger, alarm bells rang in its mind. This was his innate talent, which accompanied him through countless life-and-death battles and helped him defeat numerous opponents. Therefore, even if the person in front of him is full of flaws, he chooses to trust his intuition. The giant horned demon abruptly halted its charge and then leaped backward. Almost simultaneously, an invisible sword aura sliced through the soil and rubble along his originally planned path. "Oh, you've got some skill." Ethan turned around, the silver dragon in his hand already unsheathed. The giant horned demon was on high alert. That probing attack just now could have broken its skin even with its physique. Seeing that he didn't speak, Ethan went straight to the point. "Where's your mage companion? Didn't he come?" The giant horned demon did not answer, partly because he was not distracted and partly because he did not understand the common language of humans. For a warrior as physically gifted as him, offense is the best defense. He took a step forward and threw a punch at near-ground speed. Ethan frowned and dodged the attack with a quick movement. The demon before them, in terms of both strength and speed, was far superior to any ordinary third-tier being. That blow was so powerful that even a slight graze could have broken a bone, let alone taken a direct hit. They're tough to deal with? Even more surprising was the giant horned demon. Despite his physical abilities being enhanced by the mind-stealing magic, his attacks were actually dodged. At his level, there is no such thing as a full-force attack. Almost every strike could be considered a killing blow. To put it simply, the left punch deals more damage, the right punch deals more damage. Taking advantage of the opening, Ethan unleashed a sword strike imbued with sword intent. Just as the giant horned demon was about to block, the belated sorcerer finally managed to deliver a blocking spell. The silver dragon easily shattered the transparent light barrier, its power undiminished, and the sword blade slammed into the giant horned demon's arm. Ethan dared not challenge him and retreated after a single blow. The giant in front of me has ridiculously high defense, far surpassing that of other monsters of the same level. The sorcerer stood beside the giant horned demon, chanting rapidly as he cast a spell to alleviate its pain. "Are you all right?" "Not bad, didn't hit any bones." The giant horned demon clenched its fist without a care and then attacked Ethan. With his physique, this injury was nothing. The only difficulty was that no matter how strong a body was, it couldn't withstand repeated bloodletting. Fortunately, he believed he still had an advantage. After all, both sides' attacks were deadly and the opponent's physique was definitely inferior to one's own. All it takes is one punch. In the blink of an eye, he had already thrown over 100 punches. Dust billowed up from where Ethan had just stood, revealing a large crater created by absolute violence. Such a commotion naturally reached the manor's guards. Seeing the dark figures continuously emerging in the distance, the sorcerer urged, "Quickly finish this. Their reinforcements are arriving soon." The giant horned demon threw another punch, which Ethan dodged as usual. This was already an unknown number of punches he had thrown. He was breathing heavily, his hands, which he had used to defend against the fighting spirit, were already covered in wounds. This guy is weird. In a brief moment of respite, he pondered the peculiarities of the enemy before him. In terms of speed alone, the two are evenly matched. But why? The ability to foresee the future, or is it an unusually keen observation skill? "Give me a hand," he said in a deep voice. Ethan's clothes were soaked with sweat. His opponent was the strongest ever. He had been somewhat careless. "At first I thought he was someone similar to that mage. A swordsman like him is perfect for dealing with fragile mages. In fact, I'm confident I can defeat either the giant horned demon or the mind flayer in a one-on-one fight." The two demons' teamwork was truly remarkable. One's own attacks are always weakened in various ways, whether by shields or spells interfering with oneself, making it difficult to find an opportunity. The combination of a tank warrior and a mage is still as troublesome as rumored. The mind flayer began chanting a lengthy spell, and the horned demon temporarily abandoned its attack, choosing instead to shield the mind flayer from all possible assaults. "It's time to get serious." Ethan cracked his neck, sheathing his silver dragon sword and placing it on the ground. He closed his eyes and began to unleash his still unskilled techniques, the eternal pursuit of all swordsmen. Coincidentally, he had a slight talent for swordsmanship, domain expansion. Sword. The instant his domain unfolded, he slashed forward with a sword strike as swift as thunder, surpassing even the speed of the wind. At the same time, the sorcerer finished his incantation. Fourth-tier mind-stealing spell, sensory deprivation. The instant the spell was completed, Ethan was stripped of all his senses, and even his vision went completely dark. Their teamwork was indeed excellent, and their observations were very thorough, perfectly targeting Ethan's weaknesses. Explosive heart punch. The giant horned demon unleashed a powerful punch, so fast that the heat generated by friction with the air even scorched its flesh. Ethan knew he couldn't take the attack head-on, so he switched from offense to defense, holding the silver dragon horizontally in front of him. Ethan's attack came as quickly as it came. "Damn it, we've messed up this time." Ethan spat out the grass from his mouth, and a trickle of red seeped from the corner of his lips. The power of this spell is truly befitting of a fourth-tier single-target spell. It will likely be impossible to dispel it in the short term. However, he always held back his strength. His domain could not be easily sealed by a mere spell. This is his territory. Just as the giant horned demon was about to press its advantage, an arrow flew through the air. It raised its arm and blocked it steadily, its body being pushed back by the impact. He painfully pulled the enormous arrow from his hand, the wound so deep it went straight into the bone. He looked at the figure in the distance with apprehension. The memories flowing in his blood allowed him to instantly recognize who the newcomer was. The elf's dragon-slaying arrow, a legendary arrow capable of shooting down dragons. Fortunately, the opponent's rank was not high, otherwise he would have been seriously injured. "It's an elven ranger." "What should we do?" the giant horned demon asked. The mind flayer narrowed his eyes. The appearance of elves had never been on his radar. After all, it was common knowledge that humans and elves were at odds. Even when such relationships do occur, they are mostly between master and servant. Seeing that he remained silent, the giant horned demon said bluntly, "Who cares? A second-tier ranger is none of her business." In the blink of an eye, the wound on his hand was completely healed. This was a method that consumed the body's energy to repair all injuries. It could only be used once per battle and required a long period of recuperation. Seeing him use this move, the mind flayer's tightly furrowed brows relaxed. Now he was almost certain of victory. Surely a second-tier ranger who overestimates his abilities can't cause trouble. A hail of arrows rained down from afar like a torrential downpour. The giant horned demon paid no heed to this low-quality attack. If you get close enough, a frail elf can be torn apart in an instant. Having regained his full strength, his burst of speed instantly covered the vast distance between him and Alice just as they were about to make contact. Ethan gazed at the spotless blade of the silver dragon sword, its bright reflection illuminating his face. Even though he couldn't see, his sword had gradually adapted to the spell's blockade and his senses were slowly returning. This was the prototype of the sword domain. Did you ask me? The silver dragon's sword was deeply embedded in the giant horned demon, and Ethan stepped on its body, applying pressure with both hands. The giant horned demon gripped the silver dragon's sword tightly, its blood mingling with the crimson spray from its body, staining the ground beneath it. Just as the mind flayer was stomping his feet, cursing the B*****D for not waiting for him and for having to run closer before he could cast his spell. A lazy voice rang out, "You seem to be in trouble." The sorcerer turned around in horror, looking at the white-bladed figure lying beside him, watching the spectacle unfold. "When did you arrive?" Barren remained expressionless. "That's not important. What's important is that if you don't beg me to help, that giant horned demon will die." The sorcerer immediately knelt down, pleading, "For your highness's sake, please save my brother." Tusk. What a disappointment. Barren had originally intended to tease him, but this clever fellow used the Demon King to intimidate him. Then let's do it for his highness's sake. With that, Barren spat out the foxtail grass from his mouth and leaped up. Ethan felt a sense of danger and stepped back. Barren looked at the giant horned demon beneath his feet. "It won't die, will it?" The giant horned demon clutched its chest wound tightly, cold sweat beading on its forehead. "Thanks to you, I'm not dead yet." White Blade then turned around and met Ethan's gaze. After observing for a while, he finally spoke first. "What a coincidence, you're a swordsman too." Ethan stared into his eyes, the blood-red color of which resembled that of a cult. "Humans, are you a follower of the Demon King?" Barren picked up a twig from the ground. "I wouldn't call myself a believer, but I'd say I'm a follower." The two watched for a long time, but neither made the first move. Ethan couldn't see through the human before him. He wouldn't draw his sword unless he was certain of success. Barren dropped the branch in his hand and yawned. "Fine, if you're not going to fight, then we're leaving." With that, he picked up the giant horned demon from the ground and slowly walked back. Throughout the entire process, Ethan maintained a defensive stance and did not move. Is this oppressive feeling really from a third-tier player? Only after confirming that they had left did Ethan sheath the silver dragon. Two troublesome demons and a human swordsman of unknown origin. Their fighting power is getting a bit overconfident. There should be a group of small fish fry in such a small corner of the border. Ethan wasn't sure if the red-eyed swordsman was a fourth-tier warrior because he had never seen one before. He himself was at the 3rd rank and he had seen the power of the 5th rank in his teacher, but the 4th rank was something he truly did not understand. According to the classification of swordsmen, if that guy was a 4th-tier swordsman, he could theoretically be called a sword warrior. How could he be mixed up with demons? Although he resembled the person in his memory, Ethan was certain it wasn't him. His older brother is a protagonist with a domineering personality. How could he possibly exude a decadent aura? Besides, his older brother's eyes are white. Okay, it's certainly possible, but Ethan instinctively ruled him out. Fratricide was still too hard to accept. Ethan turned around and patted the elf girl's head. "That horned B*******D didn't scare you, did he?" The manor guards had arrived by then. Alice felt a little shy in front of so many people and she blushed as she grabbed Ethan's large hand. "I didn't." That adorable, haughty little elf is so cute even though her legs are shaking right now. Okay, then there isn't. To prevent her from losing her balance, Ethan put his arm around her waist. "Anyway, thank you for helping me." Feeling even more embarrassed, Alice pushed him away and walked unsteadily to a distance to retrieve her dragon-hunting arrow. It took her a long time to make this. Seeing Joe and his guards surrounding him, Ethan offered an explanation. "The two overconfident leaders of the demonic sect have already been defeated by me. But remember this. If you encounter demons in the future, run away immediately. Running away is shameful, but your lives are more important." "Master, may I have some?" Joe asked timidly. Ethan glanced at him. "Well, At your current level, you'd be hard-pressed to beat them in a one-on-one fight. That's a very tactful way of putting it. Hopefully, these knights won't be so foolish as to lead a few dozen soldiers into a bloody battle with the demons. Even against the weakest mind flayer, taking them down would be child's play. Of course, the difference in quality is not absolute. If you're willing to sacrifice them, 3,000 elite soldiers can kill both the giant horned demon and the mind flayer. Then Ethan's Viscountry can declare bankruptcy. Although this battle will surely make him a thorn in the side of the demons, they probably won't dare to make a move against him. When the differences between individuals are not significant, people are always willing to let those below them compete first, unless they're truly shameless enough to send a fourth-tier being to deal with Ethan. As for now, a strange balance has probably been achieved. Ethan waved for everyone to disperse while he went to find the elf lady who was still struggling with the dragon-hunting arrow stuck in the ground. Seeing that no one was around, Ethan quietly approached her and playfully patted her buttocks. "What are you doing?" Alice glared at him angrily while simultaneously glancing back to see if anyone was watching. Ethan casually pulled the arrow from the ground. "Just touch it, it's not like it'll cost you a piece of flesh. It's truly remarkable that you have the strength to shoot such a heavy arrow." "I didn't originally have the strength." Alice rested her head against him, "but somehow, seeing how hard you were trying, Okay, I know you love your husband very much." Ethan whispered in her ear, "What do you want?" "I don't ask for much, all I need is for you to love me." "How can you say that? Don't I love you?" Alice, unusually serious, said to him, "I'm pretty sure you be ****D don't love me." After saying that, she left Ethan, who was deep in thought, behind and departed alone. What did I do to offend her? Ethan looked at the dragon hunter arrow in his hand. The arrow, made of mithril, was incredibly hard yet very lightweight, and it also had excellent energy flexibility, about 5 times that of steel, allowing it to unleash tremendous destructive power from the user's energy. If a defensive device possessed this level of destructive power, then we wouldn't have to worry about giant horned demons causing trouble. Ethan, as usual, tried to think of something else. None of his smooth-talking skills could be used to resolve the matter. However, production volume is a major issue. The manufacturing precision of a standard dragon-hunting arrow is equivalent to that of a fine-grade weapon, but the cost is far greater. High-level rangers often blow the arrow apart when using this move, so they rarely use it, because it's really expensive. This arrow was a gift from Ethan. She never expected it to come in handy so soon. However, if we can't think of a solution, we'll have to resort to the most primitive method. Red bean paste, Smithy Marseille. Alice looked at him sullenly. "Did you do something wrong?" Ethan blinked. "I don't think so either, but if you think it is, then it is." Ethan swears he's not a sycophant. In his view, it's just a minor marital spat that's easy to resolve. Alice couldn't bring herself to make things difficult for him, so she patiently explained, "You saved me again today. Isn't that obvious? You're my wife. You used this same trick to win me over a few years ago. Back then I was young and naive, and I liked to act like a hero. You shrewd B********D, do you think I'd believe that? Grandma, I can't possibly risk my life to save you and end up hurting you, can I?" Alice rested her forehead against his chest. "You think I didn't notice ... It's too deliberate. It's been like this from the beginning, helping us then saving me. It's all just a ploy to marry me. Doesn't this just prove I love you?" "Heh." Alice fell silent, quite certain of her intuition. "You can't exactly say this was intentional, can you?" Ethan explained, adding that his actions today were entirely subconscious. "You're feeling guilty." Alice spotted her prey's weakness with the precision of a hunter, retaining the keen senses of a ranger. "But that's precisely why I have this opportunity to talk to you. Some things will never be revealed until the other party takes action. I was aware of this from the beginning, but..." "But what?" Alice looked up, scanning Ethan's face, which still appeared handsome despite the ravages of the years. She wrapped her arms around Ethan's neck. "I'm hopeless, but I still love you. You be *****D. Turns out he's just attracted to good looks. So you mean I love you now?" Alice mimicked Ethan's tone, saying, "How could you say that? We're husband and wife." The study door was quietly pushed open a crack, and Wolf sighed as she saw the two people already embracing and kissing each other through the light. Then they slowly closed the door for them. She had come to realize that since she already received enough favoritism, letting Alice have it a little wouldn't be a big deal. Alice's favorability rating has increased from 99 to 102. Figures stood side by side in front of the study. It's been 2 days and 2 nights already. What do you think, madam? The noise inside has been quiet for a while now. Wolf maintained a faint smile. I won't be sad no matter what the young master does. On the contrary, Sister Catherine, it seems she's never received this level of affection before. My wife and I are the same, we won't be sad. At this point, Ethan finished reloading and launched a new attack. Hearing this subtle sound, Wolf could no longer maintain her composure. She pouted, stomped her foot, and turned to leave. Catherine followed him as if she were waiting to see a good show. Late at night, the exhausted elf finally got to sleep after taking a bath. While Ethan was still lying on the sofa savoring the elf's curves, Wolf opened the door. Young master, you've worked hard. I've made you a thick stew. Wolf sat down beside him with the small pot in her hands and fed him with a spoon. Ethan was almost asleep, but it was his wife's wish and it wouldn't be right to refuse. It has to be said that Wolf's culinary skills have improved a lot in recent years. She has experimented with all sorts of recipes. As for the taste, I can only say that it's still pretty good now. The sweetness of the carrots was enhanced by the cream and the dried meat became less dry thanks to the spices. The melt-in-your-mouth, thick soup was perfect for restoring energy when you're exhausted, and Ethan soon finished it off in one gulp. Wolf took the small pot and casually set it aside. She rested her chin on her hand and asked with great interest, "What will the young master do next?" Ethan turned his head away, this. He looked out the window. Look how round the moon is, it's a perfect time to sleep. Wolf nodded, and then? What do you mean then? Sleeping is just sleeping. Young master is always the fairest, isn't he? Wolf hooked her arm around his neck. I want to have what others have. I really don't have a single drop left. Wolf didn't intend to say much to him. She simply pressed her body against him, and with her skillful touch, Ethan's clothes quickly fell to the ground. Her delicate, white fingers traced lines along Ethan's muscular physique. Young master, have you ever heard the saying, is like water in a sponge, you can always squeeze some out? I don't remember saying it like that. Before he could finish speaking, Wolf covered his mouth with her hand. Afterwards, Ethan looked at the sleeping Wolf and shook his head. Why pretend to be capable when you clearly can't do it? A woman's jealousy. Ethan clutched his back and limped to the balcony. I wonder what this tree of life is all about. Alice gave him a new skill, the gift of the world tree, which sounds pretty awesome. Although it is indeed very powerful, the effect is that a world tree will grow on the territory. However, for the time being, the territory appears unchanged. Could it have grown in Log Town? The balcony of Harvest Manor was large enough for him to overlook the entire manor, and even half of Northwind City. Ethan got dressed, preparing for his long-awaited inspection tour, and as soon as he entered the meeting hall, he saw Marcus, who was waiting anxiously. Sir, there's something strange I need to tell you. A large patch of wheat in the western part of the manor has suddenly withered. The cause is currently under investigation, but I'd appreciate it if you could come and see for yourself. The crops grown in the western fields have always been the best, making them an excellent choice whether for personal consumption or as gifts. In the vast expanse of green fields, a patch of yellow, withered plants stands out starkly like a bald patch of land in the Mediterranean Sea. Amidst the yellowish-brown hues, only a single dying green seedling survived. It's called a seedling because it hasn't even grown many leaves yet, just hanging forlornly on its thin branches. Ethan immediately noticed something was wrong, whose seedlings could grow to a meter tall. This is something you can only do with experts. In a flash, Catherine, who studied nature magic, and Alice, a native of the elf forest, were carefully examining the seedling. They studied the Book of Life for a long time before Alice finally exclaimed in disbelief, Could this be the Tree of Life? The Tree of Life of Ultsum, the source of all life, exists in only two forms. One nurtured the elves, the other is the root system of Dragon Island. Leaving aside how amazing it is, the question is, do you think I can afford to keep it right now? Ethan said. Alice twirled the golden hair between her fingers. For details, I'm afraid I'll have to write a letter home. She shook her head after saying this. No, this matter cannot be revealed. However, one thing is certain. Before the tree of life has the ability to obtain enough nutrients from the air, we must supply it with all the nutrients needed to grow. Ethan had made his decision. In that case, no one within a 2-kilometer radius will disturb it. But what does the tree of life need? Energy, at least a sufficiently vast amount of natural energy. Ethan thought for a moment. I do have some natural energy essence, all given to me by the wild bulls. I don't know if it's enough. Even in I Valley, where magical beasts abound, nature-type magical beasts are not easy to find. As a first-tier energy essence was inserted into the ground in front of the Tree of Life, the crystal-clear gem visibly lost its luster. The Tree of Life had deepened in color and its swaying branches looked more vibrant. It looks like it wants more. What a shameless, insatiable little tree. As Ethan spoke, he inserted a few more energy essences into it. The color is fading very slowly this time, indicating that the Tree of Life has temporarily passed its period of weakness. However, if we calculate it this way, the expenses for the territory will be much greater. The energy essence can't be taken for free, someone has to give some. However, since the skill is named Gift of the Tree of Life, I can't expect to receive nothing in return. I'll just have to accept it for now. I'm free anyway, so I'll take care of Ultsum from now on, Alice said. Elves are most compatible with the aura of the Tree of Life, and it is beneficial for both of them to live together. Ethan nodded. Thank you for your help. Barren casually tossed the battered giant horned demon onto the cave floor with one hand. Even though he was badly injured, he still stubbornly asked, White Blade, why did you tell me to let that guy go? The sorcerer rolled his eyes at him, annoyed. Give me a break, you'd be dead long ago without him. That's because your magic wasn't powerful enough. That Viscount regained his senses so quickly. The sorcerer didn't reply. He hadn't expected the spell to be so ineffective. Barren still had a blade of grass in his mouth. You can't blame him for that. After all, that's how swordsmen are. Their only weapon is the sword in their hand. Through continuous evolution, they naturally strive to avoid anything that might interfere with their swordplay. He looked at the sorcerer. What are you planning to do next? Are you still going to cause trouble for that swordsman? The mind flayer hesitated for a moment, sensing something was amiss. Since meeting that swordsman, Barren's attitude has changed a lot compared to before. He has become much more active. Could it be a case of mutual appreciation between people of the same kind? He didn't know the origin of the white blade. Iwayama simply said that he was an overconfident human and that he should be allowed to do his work out of respect for his highness. Looking at his bloodshot eyes, one could tell he wasn't faking it. He was a pure follower of the Demon King, so there was no possibility that he was going easy on him. Given the strength of both sides, if a decapitation strike isn't possible, it's best to proceed cautiously. After all, even the border viscounts of the Badeson Empire aren't easy to deal with using only their armies. Upon hearing that the Mind Flayer had abandoned his plans for the Viscount, White Blade lost interest. He closed his eyes and lay down on the haystack. The rest are up to you. A few barons and knights shouldn't run into any problems. That's none of your concern. Apart from this Viscount, our operations are progressing smoothly. Viscount Nan Yan frowned deeply. Too many strange things had been happening in the Nan Yan region lately. Many villages lost contact for a period of time, but then returned to normal. After all, the border areas were the territories of military nobles, and almost every village was under military control. If that's all there is to it, then it's fine. Just consider it a case of the station troops neglecting their duties. But Viscount Nanyan looked at Baron Chiang, who was still sitting in his chair, terrified and uneasy. Are you sure you're not joking, making fun of me? Baron Chiang said slowly, Viscount, you know me, I would never joke about risking my entire territory. He shook his head frantically. Madmen, they're a bunch of madmen, they took over my village, attacked my town. And finally, even my guards went mad. They shouted Demon King and hanged my knights. As for the other inhabitants, most died by their weapons. Having said that, he threw himself onto Viscount Nanyan's legs, weeping bitterly, and said, Viscount, that's the wealth and hard work of 6 generations of our family. Please, for the sake of our long-standing friendship, send troops. Nan Yan helped him up. This can't be just your problem. We, Nan Yan, know the entire border region won't stand idly by. Once this is all over, Chiang Town will still be your territory. Baron Chiang and his few remaining servants settled into a guest room, awaiting news. Viscount Nan Yan sighed. The only option now was to consolidate his forces. He summoned back the troops that had been stationed in the border area for years. What beastmen, they were no threat at all in the face of the cult. This is an evil force capable of easily destroying a baron's territory. He did not presume to do so but sent messages to all the nobles of Nanyan and the other 3 viscounts. To be on the safe side, he even sent out 5 groups of messengers showing extreme caution. As the troops assembled and the knights were recalled one by one to report back, he finally felt a bit more confident. It appears that the group that destroyed Chiang Town consisted of over 1,000 cultists, including approximately 100 to 200 former soldiers. They are the most dangerous. After all, an army that can be used to deal with orcs would be even more devastating if it were to turn its blade on humans. However, he did not act rashly, but waited for replies from the other 3 companies to see if they had experienced similar incidents. In May, after receiving the 4th group of knights who had fallen, he gathered all the information. Most of the news was bad, but among the few pieces of good news, the most exciting was that Viscount Northwind had repelled the attempts of 2 third-tier demons. Now that the enemy's true nature has been ascertained, he no longer intends to allow the cult to run rampant in the Nanyan region. 3 days ago, he issued a request for a military conference. In an instant, the entire South Rock was mobilized. Even if their horses were to die of exhaustion, the nobles were determined to gather as quickly as possible. Viscount Nan Yan donned his ancestral heavy armor, the gleaming blades reflecting a golden light. With it, Nan Yan was confident he could fight against a third-tier opponent. His arrival reassured the eagerly awaiting nobles, for the presence of their superior was always reassuring. The nobles, too, were clad in armor and armed with swords. These practical garments, while not aesthetically pleasing, were far more threatening, adding a somber atmosphere to the meeting. This is the source of confidence for border nobles over the past 100 years. Even without money or manpower, they still dared not let anyone touch them. Even a cornered dog will bite, let alone a fully armed person. Viscount Nanyan unfolded a map which showed half of the border, the territory of the 4 heroes of the border. Without any formalities or pleasantries, he went straight to the point in a deep voice. The 3 regions of Nanyan, Zimu, and Dongai have all seen disturbances involving cults, large and small. Compared to them, the commotion here is relatively small. Therefore, it's difficult for us to request aid from the other viscounts, and as for the North Wind, the only one who managed to stop the cult's attack, they're too far away, and their reinforcements will take a long time to arrive. Baron Chiang spoke anxiously. We have no time to wait. If we allow this cult to run rampant any longer, the entire Nanyan region will be in danger. Nan Yan was very displeased with his interruption, but he still patiently said, Chu Yang is right, we have suffered heavy losses. But more importantly, the cult has grown to a terrifying scale. Currently, the cult has at least 5,000 members, along with a considerable number of former soldiers. This force is not something any noble family can withstand. Therefore, our only chance of victory is to unite and take the initiative. The military conference was attended by far more than just nobles. They were simply there to begin the meeting, and the army is already on its way. Over the next few days, Nan Yan provided them with information about cults. First, high-ranking cult members can brainwash ordinary people. This is how they grow in power. Secondly, high-ranking cultists can also manipulate lower-ranking followers. This was discovered by the knights under Viscount Northwind, and it has valuable insights. Third, cultists are divided into low-level and high-level. The deeper the red of their eyes, the more devout their faith in the Demon King. Fourth, cultists possess mystical rituals that invoke power from the Demon King, usually performed by their leader. Therefore, in battle, a swift victory or decapitation strike is essential. Fifth, and most importantly, the enemy includes third-tier demons. Nan Yan raised his head and scanned the bewildered crowd. You may not know how strong a third-tier swordsman is, but our opponent isn't even an ordinary third-tier swordsman. According to Viscount Northwind, a third-tier swordsman himself, it would take at least 1,000 troops to surround him for a guaranteed victory. The dozens of nobles exchanged glances, then firmly accepted the suggestion. Even so, there's nothing to be afraid of. The army will rest for 2 days before we set off. Viscount Nanyan slammed his hand heavily on the table. The cult's infiltration eventually breached Ethan's organization's defenses. Among so many villages in the Northwind region, there were bound to be some missed. Moreover, the local lord's territory would not be small. He would be a baron, and only a territory large enough to encompass a town would neglect the villages under his control. Flower Town, a name that sounds ordinary and unremarkable. Yet, the residents living there are quite content, and the peaceful and tranquil life makes everyone feel at ease. But this town, which used to be filled with laughter and joy, is now a sea of fire, with screams and sounds of fighting mingling together, making an ear-piercing noise. The Flower Baron's guards suffered repeated defeats. Even with their valiant efforts, the servants and soldiers could not stop the surging tide of fanatical cultists. A knight, his armor covered in scratches and his body soaked in blood, knelt before the Baron. "Baron, we can't hold on any longer. They're fighting like madmen. At this point we might have to retreat." The Baron of Flowers remained unmoved. The glory of his ancestors could not be lost in his hands. He drew his longsword. "I'll be with you." Bang! The Flower Baron slowly collapsed. As the knight caught him, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "The Baron has ordered everyone to retreat." He said to the group of people in front of him, "Thank you for your help, otherwise I wouldn't be able to face the Baron." Gorm, carrying a greatsword on his back, said with a flourish, "In that case, you go and organize a retreat. Leave this place to us for now." There was no time for words of gratitude. The knight led his remaining men out of the castle. Now, under the influence of the hunter class, Gorm has become exceptionally tall and muscular, exuding a strong aura of male hormones with every move he makes. Their hunter squad consisted of a Tier 2 Greatsword Hunter, a Tier 2 Shadow Assassin, and Tier 1 Knights and Rangers. Gorm stretched his limbs. "Everyone, don't linger in the fight. The main purpose of this is to buy time for the others to retreat." He drew his 2-meter-long broadsword. But to be honest, in our hunter's tradition, pointing a weapon at a human will get you stripped of your status. Xian comforted her, "It's all right. Cultists who worship the Demon King are no longer human. You don't need to blame yourself." "Sai, why doesn't Miss Xian ever comfort me like this? I'm pitiful too, and we elves never harm animals." Murin patted him on the shoulder. "Stop talking nonsense, hurry up and finish this job. I need to go home and breastfeed my baby." Murin, who was once a school teacher, has become a seasoned knight, while still retaining his status as a specially appointed instructor at the school. He still couldn't bear to part with those lovely children, and whenever he had free time while resting in the city, he would go and teach them. At this moment, the noise outside grew louder and louder as the cultists broke through the defensive barrier and gradually poured in. Gorm, standing at the front with his back to his teammates, gave a thumbs up. "Same as always, I'll go up first and test the waters with these bastards." "Be careful." Gorm strode forward, and with a single sweeping slash, he took the lives of 5 or 6 people. The bloody scene did not frighten him. Instead, it fueled his hunter's fighting spirit. Powerful charged slash. Using the residual force of his previous strike, he instantly charged up his power and unleashed a spinning slash, inflicting damage while simultaneously using the momentum to retreat. Even the most reckless cultists were stunned by this ferocious fighting style. The dozen or so corpses lying on the ground, cut in two, testified to the enemy's strength. Cultists are nothing special. Generally speaking, when the protagonist says this, the villainous boss will immediately come along and slap him in the face. Although Gorm is not the main character. But just like that, dealing with his cult members is something he can do himself. After a period of stalemate, a group of muscular, crazed cultists rushed forward. Gorm held his greatsword horizontally in front of him while simultaneously wrestling with 5 or 6 cultists. "Sai, I really envy you hunters for having such strong physiques," Riel said, his arrows never stopping. The Ranger class, known for its ability to easily defeat weaker opponents, is quite adept at dealing with those who possess strength but lack skill. Combined with his passable archery skills among wandering knights, his destructive power was terrifying. Before anyone knew it, Xian had vanished from the spot. Marin was responsible for looking after Riel since a ranger was difficult to deal with if he got into close combat. Seeing that the number of cult members was increasing and that they had bought enough time, Riel shouted, "Our mission is almost complete, shall we continue? Hang in there a little longer. I don't want to just get the basic salary." Gorm roared and swung his greatsword, smashing several more poor fellows into a bloody pulp. Xian didn't keep them waiting long. She returned shortly afterward carrying a head. The cultist in front of Gom lost his power and was pushed away by him. Additional objective achieved: retreat. Before the cultists, as numerous as mountains and seas, could surge forward, they successfully mounted their horses and rode away from this once beautiful town. Phew! Riel let out a deep breath. Now we're going to get a huge bounty again. The cult leader's head is worth a full 5 gold coins. It's just a pity we can't capture a few alive this time. With so many cultists still trying to capture you alive, you should really be left there. I was just saying it offhand. Marin looked up at the beautiful sunset, its fiery red hue painting the entire land. He suddenly sighed, "I wonder when this chaos will end. War, from beginning to end, never has a winner." Riel, however, disagreed. Waving his whistle, he exclaimed, "My travelogue was missing a war to depict its devastation, and now this has perfectly filled that gap." This elf was always optimistic. He said, "If we're really scared, we can just run away. Or we can hide in Northwind City. The Viscount's army can defeat any scoundrel." Gom coughed, and the usually carefree young man adopted a mature demeanor and tone. "We're quite tired from the journey, so after this mission, we'll rest in Northwind City for a while." Xian raised the head in her hand, and even through the cloak, Gom could still feel her disgust. This is not the only leader. Gorm took it and upon closer inspection realized that the guy's eyes weren't actually that red. Riel leaned closer. "How much is the bounty?" Gorm pondered for a moment. Given the Viscount's character, he shouldn't withhold this small amount of bounty. After all, he's a genuine cult leader. Xian saw him praying to the Demon King. "That's 5 gold coins," Gorm thought. Each person received 125 taels of silver, a reward for their deep infiltration of enemy lines and capture of the enemy's head. With this money, everything he had always wanted to do was now a certainty. However, just to be on the safe side, it's best to be more prepared. He had been preparing for this day for a long time, and he couldn't be too careful. They outpaced the remnants of the Flower Baron's army, leaving the rest of the troops far behind on the wide new road. Taking advantage of Xian's absence, Gom finally had time to discuss things with his 2 good brothers. He scratched his head and with a thick skin told his 2 good brothers with whom he had fought side by side for many years about his plan. When he looked at Marin and Riel expectantly, their reaction was more subdued than he had imagined. "Oh, is that all? Aren't you surprised at all?" Gom asked, holding his head in his hands. "What's surprising?" Marin asked. "Are you surprised you like Xian?" Riel added. "Come on. You've been wearing this on your sleeve for years." The 2 spoke in unison like a pair of storytelling partners who had been performing together for many years. In disbelief, Gorm knelt down. "Did she know all of this?" "Well, we probably don't know as much as we do. After all, she was wearing a cloak the whole time and couldn't see your expression." Marin hesitated for a moment, but ultimately decided to offer some words of advice. After all, he was an experienced person when it came to marriage and knew its importance. "But you'd better think this through. Confessing your feelings is a 2-way street, not a one-sided act by a clown. And have you even seen what she really looks like?" "Without." Gorm quickly rallied. "I don't care what she looks like under her veil. After all, I love her for who she is." Marin and Riel shook their heads. Such matters were naturally beyond their control. "As longtime friends, I'll help if I can. If it really doesn't work, we'll disband the team. Anyway, one of them is a bard and the other is a school teacher, so they won't have to worry about food. So I'm counting on you." Gom handed them a small package containing his savings from many years of work. "Honestly, aren't you afraid we'll run off with all that money?" Marin took the small package and sighed inwardly. "It's not just about helping Gom, the key is that I also have to spend money myself. The task is simple: help Gorm buy a suitable jewelry gift. First of all, it should be confirmed that Gom and Xian are always inseparable, so he himself would not have had the time to secretly prepare a gift. This task can only be honorably entrusted to them. After handing over the mission briefing and the spoils to Knight Rasu, the group parted ways at the city gate. It's truly rare for people like them who all have their own lives to still be able to get together. Murin opened his door after a long absence and Shaw greeted him with their infant child in her arms. Honestly, they never tell me beforehand about these dangerous missions with no end date, making me worry sick. His wife's tone was reproachful, but her face betrayed her undisguised joy. Murin hugged her first, then took the child from her arms. Don't worry, didn't I tell you, if anything happens, someone will contact you within 2 months. If I wait 2 months, I'm afraid it won't be you coming back, Shaw said, turning and walking towards the kitchen. By the time she came out with a bowl of soup and bread, the young child had already been lulled to sleep by Murin. How long are you planning to rest this time? Shaw asked expectantly. Murin could only cover his embarrassment by drinking soup. Ever since he was recruited into the hunter team, although his wife had always supported him, he still felt guilty. He wasn't one to run away. After carefully choosing his words, he slowly said, "After all, the cult's affairs have only just begun. Even if our team doesn't take on any missions, I'm still a knight loyal to the Lord. So you still want to go out, right?" "Yes." "Yeah. Let's not talk about this anymore. We've got a good show to watch in a few days." That guy named Gom seems to be," Murin whispered in Shaw's ear, revealing the entire plan. Shaw's expression remained unchanged. She simply asked quietly, "And what about mine?" "Of course you get a share. I got quite a bit of the bounty this time." That's more like it. Actually, she wasn't someone who necessarily wanted gifts. She simply didn't want to waste the precious time she had with her husband on other things. So they pretended to be buying a gift for their wife and ordered a set of fine amethyst jewelry. The design was decided by Riel, as elves are always blessed with an artistic flair. A new commission came down quickly with the same content as before to investigate the cult's movements. In fact, this commission was also requested by Gom from Ethan, and the timing was just before Xian's birthday. There's always a get-together before we set off to fill our stomachs. Unlike the usual bustling restaurant, business was slow tonight with hardly any customers. In fact, this was because Gom had booked the entire second floor. Shaw made an excuse about having to take care of the children and didn't come. Halfway through the meal, Murin and Riel happened to go to the restroom together. Only 2 people remained at the table. The light outside had been turned off sometime earlier, leaving only the candlelight on the table burning silently. Over the years, Xian gradually dared to eat with them, but she still didn't take off her cloak, and the others tacitly avoided looking at her. Gom hesitated for a long time, his awkward and hesitant manner making the 2 people outside the door impatient. Xian asked directly, "Is something the matter?" It's nothing." Oh, Xian didn't say anything and continued eating her meal in silence. Actually, Xian put down her chopsticks. She couldn't stand mothers-in-laws fussing and nagging. Just treat this like reciting the hunter's handbook. Say what you want to say directly. Gom took a deep breath. "I've liked you for a long time. How about we start dating after we wipe out the cult and all the demons?" He spoke so quickly that he stumbled over a few words. The boy, who had once dreamed of becoming a hero, looked nervously at his companion. Xian paused for a moment, then picked up her chopsticks again. "Not good." Gom visibly withered away. "What I mean is, you've never even seen what I look like. How dare you confess your feelings to me? I don't care about your appearance. Really, actually, I'm very ugly. Really, I don't care if you never let me see it for the rest of your life." Xian put down her chopsticks. She suddenly didn't want to eat anymore. It still doesn't work. For the first time, she spoke in a coy, girlish voice. "You just said you wanted to kill all the cults and demons, right?" Before he could answer, Xian lifted her cloak. A cold, aloof face appeared before Gom. "And now?" "Mr. Gorm's brain has shut down. It is recommended to cool him down with ice." Xian followed closely to Gom and cupped his face in her hands. "If you date me, it would be considered colluding with the demons, Mr. Hunter." Although the 2 people in the private room were happily embracing each other, the elf ranger and the night teacher had already silently squatted down on the spot. Why would it be a demon? Riel asked, his face serious and his expression helpless. How could Miss Xian be a demon? Marin was speechless. They wished they could strangle their past selves from 3 minutes ago. Just listen and that's enough. Why keep thinking about peeking? Now things are really messed up. Xian took off her cloak and the trouble shifted to them through the crack in the window. This matter, shouldn't we just keep it from getting out? Marin hesitated for a long time but finally shook his head. No, I have to answer to the master. He's still my brother-in-law and I'm not this concerned about him. What if he wants to kill Xian? Riel added, besides, we know Xian's character perfectly well. She's definitely not a demon who enjoys killing. Even if something really happens in the end, let us deal with her. Marin didn't even glance at him. You think you can beat him? Forehead. That one sentence left Riel speechless. Just as she was wondering what to do, Xian pushed open the door. Come in and let's talk about it. Since they were all companions she'd spent years with, Xian didn't hold back and said bluntly, what you think doesn't matter. Even if the Viscount really wants to deal with me, I can just run away. And so it was decided. Marin went to report to Lord Ethan and, if things went wrong, to signal Riel. In the end, Gom and Xian became an ill-fated couple and fled the border to another place. This is the best approach to getting close to both sides' bottom lines. The following day, Marin went to see Ethan. Without even drinking any tea, he nervously told Ethan Xian the truth about her demonic identity. However, Ethan's reaction exceeded Marin's expectations. Oh, I can probably guess. There are essentially two possibilities for hiding one's face. One is that they feel they are too ugly or too beautiful and are worried about causing trouble. The other is due to racial differences. If it's the former, after all these years of adventures together, I should at least show you what I look like, but I'm still keeping it completely hidden. So it must be the latter. As for the latter, after eliminating the common races and the orcs, only the demons remain, the ones that can't be brought to light. Marin seemed to see a glimmer of hope. So, sir, what do you intend to do with her? You've been working for me for years, let's keep things the same. Ethan interrupted Marin before she could cheer. There are just some questions I need to ask her in person. Confident in her skills and daring, Xian entered the manor's living room alone, believing she could escape no matter the risks. But this time, she was wrong. A sharp aura emanated from the Viscount, who sat high in the main seat. The overwhelming pressure from the powerful swordsman almost suffocated her. Her inner warning reached its peak just like that day. If she didn't run, she would die, just as she was about to lose control of herself. In an instant, the aura dissipated into the air. This isn't our first meeting, Miss Xian. Could you please tell me your real name? Ethan greeted guests and subordinates with the same warm smile as always, but Xian dared not underestimate him. Xian is Xian, the female demon Xian. Ethan nodded slightly. All right, since you consider yourself Xian, let's make a trade. In exchange for information about the demon clan, you'll gain the right to walk openly and legitimately on this land. What do you mean by that? There has never been a city in the world that could tolerate demons. Moreover, humans are the most xenophobic race. Recently, I've been trying to integrate the orcs into Northwind City, and there's been some progress. At least the residents are getting used to having a group of orcs working for their lord. Aren't you worried about being branded as colluding with the beastmen? This is the border. There was no collusion with the orcs. They were merely my slaves, my workers. No one can refute that. In terms of making claims, slavery is almost a universal excuse. After all, it's not an exaggeration to say that everyone did it. Zai frowned. Indeed, there were often groups of beastmen working diligently in the city, and the residents had become accustomed to it. After all, attacking the orcs could lead to accusations of damaging the lord's property, something no one wanted to accept. At the same time, these orcs actually learned the human language. Although they spoke it very poorly, it was still somewhat understandable. In other words, it means pretending to be an orc. Xian touched her curved horns. She could indeed be mistaken for a beastman. After all, most ordinary people can't distinguish between the various races of the beastmen, let alone the difference between the demon race and the beastmen. Since you, as the lord, are vouching for me, then I trust you. She didn't really trust Ethan, it was just that this place held too many memories. Unless absolutely necessary, maintaining the status quo was best. Ethan went straight to the point. What is your background and do you know anything about the Demon King's cult? The demon clan of Banshees was hunted down and driven out of the demon realm 3 years ago. As for the Demon King's cult, I've never heard of it. A Banshee, it seems things aren't peaceful even within your demon race. His Highness the Demon King remains asleep, and the various tribes under his command are not at peace, having been at war for over a century. In other words, the demon race started fighting each other again not long after losing the racial war. Ethan is hard to judge. No wonder history books always praise the demons' extraordinary strength while simultaneously belittling their intelligence. So who do you think created the Demon King's church? The Demon King cult couldn't possibly be the product of any powerful force. They don't need to curry favor with your Highness, and your Highness doesn't need their appeasement. So, it's probably just some overconfident fools trying to use His Highness the Demon King's name to do some outlandish things. Among them, there are probably no fifth-tier beings. Yes, that's well said. Don't say it again next time. In her words, fifth-tier heroes were as common as cabbages. Were demon heroes mass-produced, there are no fifth-tier heroes, so there must be fourth-tier ones. Otherwise, according to her description, even third-tier beings probably wouldn't be able to meet the Demon King. Ethan stood up from his chair. In that case, we'll have to rely more on your team for intelligence gathering in the future. As for the cultists who destroyed Flower Town, Ethan twisted his neck. It's time to show them what a real army is like. Chiang Town is just ahead. Viscount Nanyan looked at the town still shrouded in black smoke, a stark contrast to the tranquility he remembered. As he wallowed in his past, scouts at the front reported, "Viscount, many cultists are still hiding in the town and a mysterious ritual is currently underway. We haven't seen any ordinary residents." Viscount Nanyan turned and asked, "Do the warriors still have the strength?" Several knights declared that the warriors' morale was high, and they were ready to attack at any moment. "Pass down the order, rest in place for 3 hours. After that my troops will lead the charge." The reason why an allied force is an allied force is that it is a means of several armies coming together to increase their strength and power. In reality, when a war actually breaks out, each side usually commands its own army. However, they were not fighting alone. The various armies were essentially small coalitions, with the Baron leading a few trusted knights or a coalition of knights. Because of their small size,